Education for April 19th, 2022 is called to order. For tonight's meeting, any item that will be voted on has been posted on the PPS website under the Board and Meetings tabs. This meeting is being streamed live on PPS TV Services website and on Channel 28, and will be replayed throughout the next 2 weeks. Please check the district website for replay times. Good evening. It's nice to see everyone tonight. The superintendent has let the board leadership know that he's out sick and therefore won't be joining us this evening. Subbing in for him tonight is Deputy Superintendent Claire Hertz. Thank you for being here. And I can see that we have a full house tonight. The Portland Public Schools Board of Education values public input in making important decisions that affect Portland's children. We also believe in the right of community members to observe and participate in board meetings. And we also want to carry out the work in front of us to ensure that both the public has an opportunity to attend school board meetings and ensure that the board can conduct the important business of the district. I want to remind everyone here of some basic rules of conduct, which I expect that we will all follow. We ask that all members of the public attending this meeting tonight treat each other, staff, and the board with respect. And that's the expectation that we have and that I have. As adults, we are models to our young people, and we want to model civic engagement and good discourse. Individuals here are encouraged and even strongly urged to engage in conduct that allows the ability of other individuals here and virtually to watch the board meetings and does not infringe on the ability of other members of the public to offer comment to the board or that interferes with the ability of the board to conduct its business. And I want to repeat that again, but the basic gist is to just be conscious of each other, be mindful of each other, and be graceful with each other. Those wishing to display play cards, signs, and or banners must remain in the auditorium foyer behind the seating area and may not block any attendees' view of the proceedings. And also, please be mindful of keeping the walkways clear and the aisles clear. In general, we would appreciate it if you can just be mindful of others in the room, the words that you use, and be aware of who's watching, including our community's children. Speaking for myself, I value input from all of our community members, and I also have a high tolerance for conflict. But it's important that we collectively create a space in which the board can conduct our business, and we can hear from those who wish to be heard. I wrote that myself. I'm gonna, if you'll bear with me for just a moment while I'm signing in. The first thing we have tonight is a resolution to recognize Teacher and Administrator Appreciation Week. I can't think of a better way to start off the evening tonight than to recognize our amazing educators and school administrators. Deputy Superintendent Hertz, would you like to introduce this item, please?
Certainly would. Thank you, Chair DePass. Teacher and School Administrator Appreciation Week is a favorite for many, as it is a tradition for students and families to recognize their educators in their lives that make such a difference. I'd like to invite Chief Human Resource Officer Sharon Reese up, who will say some more about this year's resolution.
Thank you, Deputy Superintendent Hertz. And good evening, directors and Student Representative Weinberg. It's my pleasure to bring this resolution forward this evening. It's been a tough couple of years. COVID keeps throwing punches, and our teachers and our administrators keep getting back up again and again. They keep showing up for kids day after day, month after month. I'm pleased the board is recognizing and appreciating these heroes tonight and during Teacher Administrator Appreciation Week of May 2nd. COVID and current conditions remind us that there's no entity with bigger impact in a community than its public education system, its school district. Our political, social, economic systems rely on the education of our citizens. Within that public education system, it is our teachers and our administrators who have the biggest influence on students and student achievement. We have high hopes and high expectations for our students. Our vision says a graduate of Portland Public Schools will be a compassionate, critical thinker, able to collaborate and solve problems, and be prepared to lead a more socially just world. That's a tall order, and it's becoming a taller order all the time. In a time of increasing social division, where social media is designed to and does an excellent job of spreading massive misinformation, fomenting outrage and hate, dehumanizing and disconnecting us. It is our teachers and our administrators who can and do every day strive to create the conditions where learning can thrive. Did you know that researchers are documenting a shift in college-age students, a decreasing ability and capacity for empathy, and an increasing ability and tendency towards narcissism? Yet empathy and connection are the necessary conditions for dismantling racism. It is our teachers and our administrators who are on the front lines of teaching our students civil discourse, of modeling and teaching empathy, of creating connections. It is our teachers and our administrators who are on the front lines of creating places where everyone belongs, even when they disagree, and are on the front lines of building relationships, engaging constructively and empathetically, so that our students can exceed our warm demand to be a compassionate, critical thinker, able to collaborate and solve problems, and be prepared to lead a more socially just world. Let me share, let me bring up 3 quotes. The voices of 3 teachers who were asked, why do they teach? First teacher said, I firmly believe that my fundamental job as a special educator is not simply to help students navigate their school career or prepare for post-secondary outcomes, but to help them claim and reclaim their lives. This charge serves as my humbling call to action each day. Teacher 2, I dream to see my students soar to their greatest potential. Teacher 3, I love when each student walks in and sees me and my smile and can relax, feel comfortable, and have a stable environment. It is an amazing feeling when they smile and tell me about their future goals and new adventures. I love being their biggest cheerleader and will always help them achieve whatever goal they set. Directors, education is our antidote to what ails us as a community, and our teachers and our administrators are the providers of that antidote. Thank you for your attention tonight.
Thank you. That was very moving. Thank you, Sharon. Do I have a motion now and a second to adopt Resolution 6478, resolution to recognize Teacher and Administrator Appreciation Week?
So moved.
Second.
Director Brim Edwards moves. Director Scott seconds the adoption of Resolution 6478. And is there any board discussion?
I know one of the teachers that's getting their 35 years this year, and I was talking to a friend about her the other day, and Miss Frisbee, and the friend was doing a clay project in the classroom and walked in, and she said, Miss Frisbee didn't even really need me there. She just knows how to work with her students. She's such an expert, handles all sorts of things, and it's amazing to see, those seasoned veteran educators who have given so much to so many students, and especially as parent volunteers to learn from them when we're working with our own kids or volunteering in classrooms. And so just really want to honor the so many years that teachers have given and our administrators.
Thank you. I also want to remember my grandmother, who was a teacher, certified teacher. She was certified to teach Negroes. And the photograph I have of her is of her second year students, some of whom are 16 and 17 years old. They weren't able to go to school until they were teenagers, and so she had them in their second year of learning how to read. And some of them are taller than her, so we've come a long ways. I just want to recognize her. And then my mother and father, both educators as well. So I have a deep appreciation for the practice and the profession.
Chair DePass. I just wanted to note, since I print out our board books still, just as I scroll through it, we have pages and pages. I know, but as I scrolled through it and I printed it out, we have I look at the number of the experience we have in this district and how fortunate we are, starting with, Chris Weber, who's been with PPS for 40 years. Pretty amazing. So it was mainly the length of the list that made me think about just the depth of experience we have in PPS and how lucky we are. Looking through it, I see, teachers who over the years taught my kids, my friends' kids, or taught in the neighborhood schools, and also administrators who have been in schools all over the district. So just really appreciate the tenure and what, because, our people, it's what makes our district. So appreciation to all the teachers, administrators, and the years of service.
Thank you, and I did not print this out, but I think we might consider a practice moving forward of naming the people that have been here 35 and 40 years. They've given their entire careers to this district and should be recognized by name.
Also noticed that we have two Curtis Wilsons, so Curtis Wilson is going to last for a long time here.
They're brothers.
They are?
Yes,
That's right.
They're brothers.
yes, they are.
I'd forgotten that.
They're both principals.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
Oh,
I-
It is not a typo. So thank you. That was our board discussion. I suppose, Ms. Bradshaw, is there any public comment on that item?
There is. We have Elizabeth Teal.
Okay, and hi, Ms. Teal, Student Representative Weinberg.
Yeah, I just wanted to also extend recognition to all the teachers, especially both my parents, one who works for PPS, and they've both taught for a combined of over, I believe, 45 years. And my mom has actually taught for over 25 years in intensive skills. So I see that every day coming back from teaching middle school, which in itself is a challenge, but also teaching kids with special needs, the additional challenge, the amount of IEP meetings, dealing with parents. Unfortunately, that is part of the job. And I just see how much work, how much energy is being sapped by the school district that's just taking so much from some of these teachers who have been here for so long. So my appreciation goes out to them. Thank you.
We can clap for that. Thank you. Hello.
Hello. Good evening, Chair DePass, Vice Chair Scott, Student Rep Weinberg, Deputy Superintendent Hertz, and the members of the board. And thank you for taking this time this evening to reflect on and appreciate the incredible value of our professional educators in Portland Public Schools. And thank you, Chief Reese, for your remarks as well. As a PPS parent myself, I could not be more appreciative of the educators at Vernon and McDaniel who have deeply impacted my own children, teaching them not just knowledge and skills, but also how to be in a community, how to create positive change, how to pursue what you love, embrace what makes you unique, and support others to do the same. I want to thank every teacher that has touched my own kids' lives. But as president of the Portland Association of Teachers, I have the incredible honor of representing more than 4,000 of some of the most dedicated and community-minded workers in our society. Every educator I know chose this profession because of a profound belief in the promise of our youth, a passion for learning, and a desire to actively build a more just and equitable society. This passion and commitment shows up every single day, in every school, in countless interactions with students. And as you know, these last 2 years have been particularly and incredibly challenging for educators. In the last 2 years, educators have redesigned their practices over and over again and have been there at every step to support students facing new levels of struggle and challenge. Despite the uncertainty in our society, educators do more than seems possible to make a stable, joyful, responsive, and productive day for every student that comes through their door. In this year, even educators with 10, 20, 30, 40 years of experience all have met challenges beyond what they have ever seen. I think we all agree that what schools provided before is not adequate to meet the needs of today. Knowing that, teachers across the district ask themselves every day, what do these students need now? What is most important? How can I provide it for them? Just so, as a district, we need to ask, what do our students need now, and what do educators need to provide it for them? As we reflect on the value of our professional educators, please know that the things that educators need to feel appreciated are the same things that inspired us to become educators in the first place. First, educators want the teaching and learning conditions that honor the role that public schools play in our society and in our students' lives, which Chief Reese so eloquently spoke of. This includes clean and safe school buildings and classrooms. And thank you to our custodians. We need more of them. And we need to pay them a fair wage. And this includes supports for our students in the building, including whole child enrichments and more special education and ELL staff. Educators, number two, educators want to be provided the tools we need to meet the needs of our students, and that includes time in the workday to plan and collaborate and communicate with families, and class sizes and caseloads small enough that allow us to give each student the attention they deserve. And finally, and most simply, educators ask to be treated as the professionals we are and listened to. And I want to appreciate all of you for your commitment to appreciating, honoring, and listening to educators all year long. Thank you for the time this evening.
Thank you, too. Thanks for your comments. The board will now vote on Resolution 6478, resolution to recognize Teacher and Administrator Appreciation Week of May 2nd, so we're a little early. Week of May 2nd. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes. All opposed, please indicate by saying no. Are there any abstentions? Resolution 6478 is approved by a vote of 7-0, with Student Representative Weinberg voting.
Yes.
The board will now vote on the consent agenda. Board members, if there are any items you'd like to pull for discussion, we'll set those aside for discussion and vote at the end of the meeting. And Ms. Bradshaw, are there any changes to the consent agenda?
No.
And Director Scott?
Yeah, I'd like to pull Resolution 6484 on interdistrict transfers for discussion at the end of the meeting.
Just a question on that, about moving it to the back of the meeting. Were the individuals who wanted to comment, are they commenting? Because if they're ready now, maybe we should move it to the end of the meeting.
We can take their testimony now.
Yes, we can take we'll take the testimony now, and then we'll move any questions for staff to the end of the meeting.
Okay.
Thank you for accommodating.
Also, I have a question about the education resource strategies, and I can ask it at the end, and I apologize. I thought it was a question for Dr. Proctor. It's actually a question for Deputy Superintendent Claire Hertz, so I can wait to the end.
It's for Chief Delgadillo.
Okay,
Okay.
so anyway, I can wait until the end, and I apologize that I
It's just
gave
that
the heads
one.
up, gave the heads up to the wrong person.
Oh,
It's,
it's the one, it's the under expenditure contracts, and it would be education resource strategies. Okay, so we'll pull that for discussion as well. Aside from pulling 6484 until the end of the meeting, and then I guess pulling the individual item under the expenditure contracts, we'll go ahead and vote on the consent agenda with those changes. Board members, let's see,
Sure,
Ms.
pass.
Bradshaw, are there comments?
We
Okay.
do have 2 people signed up for public comment.
Excellent. So we'll go ahead and take their testimony now.
Okay. They're both here virtually, and I'm going to move them over right now. We'll start with Sarah Beagle.
This meeting is being recorded. This meeting is being recorded.
Ms. Beagle,
Hi, yes. Can you hear me?
we can hear you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for having me give public comment today. I definitely appreciate the opportunity. And we have sent some emails to the board members, and so it sounds as though you've received those. So I'm probably going to read some of it and then maybe address a couple things, and definitely appreciate your time here today. So, we are writing, and we're speaking today regarding the standard interdistrict transfer process for the upcoming school year, and we have two requests. My husband and I have corresponded with you and Ms. Judy Brennan over the past couple of months regarding this issue, and we also had the opportunity to talk with our zone representative, Vice Chair Scott, last week. And we're grateful for everyone's time thus far. Would like to consider the following as our public comment. We reviewed the report titled 2022-23 Standard Interdistrict Transfers, which was released to the public on Friday, April 15th on the website. In that report, there is language that states, as general transfers are not allowed between PPS schools without a hardship reason or to access specialized programming, general transfers out of PPS would not be aligned with district transfer priorities. Therefore, staff has not included a general release category in the 2022-23 recommendation. To us, this rationale falls flat. We assume that the enrollment and transfer staff are referring to general transfers among PPS schools, i.e. within district, as not being allowed. However, general transfers into PPS are allowed for up to 100 students without a hardship reason or access to specialized programming. To say that having a parallel priority category of general transfers out of PPS is not aligned with district transfer priorities is disingenuous. Again, if PPS is allowing up to 100 general transfers into PPS schools, then they should be allowing up to 100 general transfers out of PPS schools. In addition, the general transfers into PPS are a direct result of neighboring districts providing for general transfers out of their districts. Again, we have received no real transparent rationale for why a general transfer category out of PPS is not being proposed. Request number one, we are requesting that the board add a general transfer category for transfer out of PPS for up to 100 students to be in alignment with the general transfer category for transfer in to PPS for the upcoming school year. Second, we note that this report was prepared by the Director of Enrollment and Transfer, Ms. Judy Brennan, as well as the Deputy Superintendent, Claire Hertz. Superintendent Guerrero has concurred with the staff's recommendations for the standard interdistrict transfer procedures for the upcoming school year. These recommendations are being proposed to you for your review and vote. We appreciate the effort and the analysis being presented in the report, and we recognize that it is a lift for the staff to prepare this information for you on an annual basis. If you look at the procedures recommended by the administration, we would like to state that we are actually in support of the procedures listed as number 4 and number 5 in the report on the first page. These are the same procedures are captured again in the table above Superintendent Guerrero's signature. What they state are students enrolled in a different district who move to a PPS address and wish to remain in their current district, and siblings of students enrolled in the requested district in 2021-22 who will remain enrolled in 2022-23. Both of those categories could be released.
Ms. Beagle?
However, we don't.
Ms. Beagle?
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. We allow everyone to testify for 3 minutes, and I don't know if you heard the signal go off a few seconds ago. So we do have your.
Oh, no, it's not.
It's not a problem. We do have your written testimony, and if you have additional thoughts, you're welcome to submit them as well.
Okay, I do have 2 sentences if it's worth saying. I just want to point out that May 19th, 2016, the language in there is what is in the report. That is language from the Oregon Department of Education, and I will forward that to you all now so you'll have it for the end of the meeting for your discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have James Tully, who is also virtual. James, I've tried to move you over. You have to accept the request.
Ms. Bradshaw? Well, we're actually waiting for someone that has public testimony. So it's someone that's appearing virtually, and we're allowing him the space to connect. Well, I needed clarification, obviously, so. Are we having difficulty? Okay, or I don't know if he would like to present something in writing, if he's able.
We can always vote on the consent agenda because we pulled this matter that he's speaking to off the consent agenda and see if at the end of that.
Thank you. So Director Lowry has reminded me that we will be speaking to this issue at the end of the meeting, and so if he'd like to, we can try to get him at that time. I'm not sure what the tech difficulty is, but so do I have a motion and a second to adopt the consent agenda minus the resolution 6484 and to speak to later?
Well,
at the
thanks.
end
I'll
of the
make that
meeting.
motion.
I'll second.
And the contract for education resource strategies. Director
Second.
Green, was that you?
I did. I made that motion.
And I seconded that motion.
I'm sorry, Chair DePass, did we pull 2 items
We
from
did
the?
pull 2.
Okay.
We pulled resolution 6484, and then we pulled from the expenditures contracts from resolution 6484, the one item, it would be 91415, education resource strategies
Okay,
for
that's what I
discussion.
thought, but I missed the second one, I'm sorry.
No worries. Okay, so I have a motion from Director Green and Director Consam seconds the adoption of the consent agenda. Is there any board discussion on the consent agenda besides what's happening over here to my left? I want to make sure we hear from our student representative on what his thoughts are on the consent agenda.
Is this me voting yes?
This is you sharing your thoughts, if you want to. We can't tell you how to vote on
I will be
anything,
voting
but
yes.
we could hear your thoughts.
I'm thinking
What
I
are
will
your
be voting
thoughts?
yes.
Okay. That's a. Is there any public comment, Ms. Bradshaw? We did have it. The board will vote on resolution 6479 through 6485 minus 6484 and the expenditure contract education resource strategies. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
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 All opposed, please indicate by saying no. And are there any abstentions? And student representative?
Yes.
The consent agenda is approved by a vote of 7-0, with student representative unofficially voting yes. We'll turn now to student and public comment. Before we begin, I'd like to review the guidelines for public comment. First, the board thanks everyone for taking the time to attend the meeting tonight and providing your comments. As we all know, and you know, public input informs and improves our work, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts, reflections, and or concerns. Our responsibility as a board is to listen, and to that end, I would ask each of us here to give our full attention to the people in front of us. Our board office may follow up with you on board-related issues raised during public testimony. We request that complaints about individual employees be directed to the superintendent's office as a personnel matter. And if you have additional materials or items you'd like to provide to the board or the superintendent, we ask that you mail them to public comment, all one word, at pps.net. Please make sure when you begin your comment that you clearly state your name, and please spell your last name, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. You'll hear a sound after 3 minutes, which means it's time to conclude your comments. Ms. Bradshaw, do we have anyone signed up for student or public comment?
Yes, we do. And we have Nima Cruz, who's providing virtually.
Hi.
Hello, Ms. Cruz.
Okay, awesome. Hi, my
Hello.
name is Nima Cruz, CREWS, and I'm a 6th grader at Harriet Tubman Middle School. As you guys know, there have been walkouts from HTMS to this building, and we're not only doing this for Mr. Chu, but also because we feel abandoned because you guys took the only teacher that cares about us and can relate to us away. The environment at our school is way too toxic. There have been many fights and students out of class not learning anything. And because the environment is so chaotic, it makes the teachers not want to come to school, which means we have to have a sub and then kids don't learn anything, which causes us to have teacher shortages than sub shortages. For example, we have had lots of subs in the 7th grade math classes and in the 6th grade STEM class because sadly our teacher had to leave due to the mask mandate coming down and her health issues with that. And because of that, all the kids do in that class is have free time and don't make, build, or learn anything in that class like you're supposed to. And I'm not sure if you guys have made an effort to find a new one or not. You guys have done nothing to help us besides hide in this building and take away our only good teacher. I just have one question for you guys. Do you care about us? And you guys should answer it because your actions are not speaking.
I don't know if you could see and hear that applause.
Yeah, I can. But are you guys going to answer?
Shall we go down the line?
I care about you guys.
Yes.
I'm going to just thank you for your comment, and your question is a really good one. Thank you. We're not to respond from the dais.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're going to move on. I appreciate, Ms. Cruz, I appreciate your comments and your question. Thank you.
We have Aaron Cruz. Aaron, are you with Nima?
I don't think he's going to be joining us today.
Okay, thank you.
It's me.
Then we have Rada Wiley Sode.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, board members. My name is Rada Wiley Sood, WILEY-SOOD, and I am an 8th grade student at Harriet Tubman Middle School.
Pardon me, just a moment, Ms. We're resetting your timer.
Okay.
No worries.
Can I start now?
You may, yes.
Okay.
We just want to make sure you had the full time.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, board members. My name is Rada Wiley Sood, and I am an 8th grade student at Harriet Tubman Middle School. I'm here today to talk about the effect of the I-5 freeway expansion on Harriet Tubman students. We can only be outside for recess, arrival, and dismissal. My friends and peers feel as though we are not cared for by the members of the board. I'm sure now is the point where you will say, we cannot control what ODOT does, but that's a blatant lie. You said that you were unaware of the project, but a simple search shows that this plan has been publicly known since 2010. If any of you put on the local news, chances are you would have heard about this. I'm sure many of you like to be updated on current events, so I'm certain you've seen it on the news at one point or another. As a mixed Indian, I have privileges that my family does not. I want to use those privileges and ensure that my voice is being heard and that you will actually take action, because I have plenty of peers ready to protest the paltry compromise you'll inevitably make. I will not stand for the board making claims of diversity while harming and ignoring students of color. You all have the power to make change, but rather ignore the prominent issues and actually care about your students. It makes me incredibly disappointed and sad to see people of color on the board who are not advocating for students like me. I would love to have such strong members like you go to bat for your students, yet you seem to be apathetic towards the community you serve. I also wanted to mention the suspension of Mike Salmon and Brian Chu. I understand you cannot comment on this because it's a personnel issue, but your reasoning is flawed as to why these teachers are suspended. In Mr. Chu's class, we have a new sub every 2 days. There was no reasoning provided for Profe Salmon's suspension except that he was a known advocate for Mr. Chu. Your administrators flaunt so-called discourse while you silence student and staff voices. We are not actually learning anything, and your idea was to solve staffing issues with more staffing issues. Quite frankly, I'm enraged, disappointed, and frustrated with the board, and I feel as if you don't care what happens to your students. You have no empathy or remorse for how your decisions are affecting students' social, emotional, and mental health. You are making empty promises to get us into contact with ODOT and having one-sided conversations with students where you repeatedly say you cannot comment. Please, for me and my peers' sakes, do better. Thank you for your time.
Danny Cage.
Good evening, directors. I'm gonna move this. Good evening, directors and community members. I am Danny Cage, Grant High School's district student representative and student representative to the PPS Board of Education Policy Committee. Recently, on April 6th, dozens of Harriet Tubman Middle School students walked out over a recent teacher placed on leave, Brian Chu. Dozens of students are demanding questions on their education being disrupted and reinstating of their teacher. We must be clear and realistic. Students do not walk out of school for a bad educator. As a civic leader, organizer, and representative, I often interact with his students through civic engagement and PPS. His students gave vital input on the climate policy that we passed, often show up to our student engagement events, and participate in community organizing. They often fulfill our graduate portrait, which is what we as a district strive for, through the leadership of Mr. Chu as an educator, and he's to thank for this. Last week, I visited Whitman Elementary School. I wore my Whitman shirt. When teaching a couple times there throughout the day, I had black male students come up to me and tell me, "Your hair is like mine," pointing to their hair. Those words hold so much importance because representation matters to our students more than we think. I bring this up because we have people in schools, because when we have people in schools that look like our students, it creates safe spaces. When we take away those safe spaces, it disrupts them. I stand before a board. 3 of you are black and understand the representation and why this matters. Lastly, when having conversations with educators and PPS, many teachers of color have said they have been under scrutiny compared to white educators. I join teachers, community members, and parents in demanding there be an audit of HR practices because of this. I love PPS, and I care, and I know many others as well. When we do not donate our free hours if we do not. And I believe that we can reverse harmful choices like this and set us on the path back to progress for our students. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have Chloe Wolfson.
Hopefully everyone can hear me. My name is Chloe Wolfson, and I'm a student at Harriet Tubman Middle School and a student of Brian Chu, Mr. Chu. I would like to talk about how the school has changed without him and why we need him in our school. Mr. Chu, just to say this, is a really great teacher. He has made sure we're supported, and he has done everything in his power. And he's also talked about stuff and has discussions with us that made me think of a lot of different stuff that I've never thought about and be more educated. And I've learned a lot from him. When we came back, he was suspended, and it was certainly different. There's been steps in the classroom, there's been signs up on the school bring him back, and and it's only been different. The classroom hasn't felt the same since he's left. Some of his stuff has been taken out, and I really miss him being in the classroom. He was a really important teacher to me, and he actually talked about stuff that other teachers didn't bring up. He talked about stuff that he actually talked about problems with the school, problems with the air quality. like problems about like how like they how like we're like right next to the highway. And I think I've heard some other teachers talk about this, but we've never had like a full like discussion with the class about this. And I'm bringing this up of how like he's just like different teachers. He really seems to care about us, and I would really like him back in the classroom. Like one of the examples of things like he has brought up is in the classroom as a topic is how Black History Month is the show's month, and I've never thought about that. Like I never thought about how it's the show's month and how that probably was like how that was like purposeful, and like there's been so much I've learned from him. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ms. Wolfson.
We have Moira Finnegan.
Good evening. My name is Moira Finnegan. My last name is spelled Finnegan. I'm a speech language pathologist, and I work at Franklin High School. I've worked in special education in PPS for 10 years. I've worked at many schools during my time in PPS, from kindergarten through post-high school services for young adults. I truly love my job. It's challenging, but very fulfilling. I know I am making a difference in the lives of my students. I'm here tonight because I am concerned about a proposed budget cut of $1.7 million for special education next year. While the overall PPS student population is decreasing, the number of students in need of special education services is going to stay about the same next year. Yet we are projected to lose 16 special education positions next year. That means we're going to have fewer special education teachers and other providers to serve the same number of students. I can tell you that special education staff are already spread so thin that we are at a breaking point this year. If PPS goes forward with these proposed cuts, an unsustainable load will be placed on both special education and general education teachers and students. That's because special education staff partner with general education teachers to support students with academic and behavioral needs in the classroom. If we are cut, our general education colleagues will feel it too. We have experienced a much greater need for behavioral supports for our students this year, as students have struggled to get reacclimated to full-time in-person school after being home and doing school online for over a year. The district has acknowledged that there is a need for increased mental health and behavioral supports for our students, but they are effectively decreasing these types of supports for students with disabilities by cutting the special education budget. Why are special education positions being cut? Our students are among the highest need students in the district. Our students include historically underserved Black, Native American, and students of color. We know these students have experienced inequitable educational outcomes due to the effects of systemic racism. Added to that, our special education students contend with the challenges of learning disabilities, developmental disabilities, autism, and other challenges. Cutting supports for these students is not in keeping with the district's values and does not align with the district's goal of improving academic and life outcomes for historically underserved students. What will the district be spending money on next year that is more important than direct service to our highest need students? My understanding is that PPS will have approximately $26 million more next year to spend than we've had this year. Why would we be cutting special education staff or any teachers or student support staff for that matter when we will have more money next year? Please do the right thing and restore the $1.7 million to the special education budget for next year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Courtney Brown.
Good evening, Deputy Superintendent, General Counsel, Directors, Student Rep. My name is Courtney Brown, Brown. I'm a PPS parent of 2 daughters. I have a freshman at Grant and I have a 7th grader at Harriet Tubman. I am here tonight to comment on the disciplinary action taken against Mr. Brian Chu. The actions taken by the district are wrong and they hurt Tubman students. As you just heard, I don't have to tell you how brutal the last 2 years have been for our kids. They have suffered mightily through the pandemic and the impact on their mental health is well documented. At Tubman, these effects are on display every day, and the situation is made worse by the fact that as of Monday, our school has lost 9 full-time teachers. My daughter has lost her science teacher, her compacted math teacher, the health teacher, and then the district goes and puts Mr. Chu on leave, and on Monday, she lost her Spanish teacher. For reasons that have yet to be explained. There is a rotating cast of subs who have no connection to these students and consequently are ill-equipped to deal with the difficult dynamics of the classroom, let alone to teach them anything. Our principal reported in a PTSA meeting just last Thursday that our kids have had to, quote, endure a lack of consistency and relationships. The kids don't feel valued, everyone is exhausted, morale is low, and that Mr. Chu's absence, quote, took it to a whole new stratosphere. Do you know that the kids love Mr. Chu? Do you know that he's particularly good at connecting to them? It's ironic that this meeting begins with a resolution for Teacher Appreciation Week because Mr. Chu is exactly the kind of teacher that his students will never forget. He listens to them, he values them, his classroom is a safe space for them. So why would you go and rip this beloved teacher out of the classroom, with a teacher with so many deep and important connections to his students who desperately need him right now? Why would you do this? It seems like a drastic step for PPS to take. Was he harming students? Was he posing some threat to the classroom? I don't think that that's the case. I think he posed a threat of harm to you and that you are retaliating against Mr. Chu because you don't like his criticism and you were insulted by some of the wording he used at a board meeting. I simply cannot understand how any of these alleged offenses warrant ripping this beloved teacher out of this community, especially at this time, at this school, and this teacher. These kids are suffering for your vendetta against Mr. Chu. It makes the district look petty, it is unprofessional, it is vindictive, it makes you look bigoted, but worst of all, it makes you look like you don't care about our students. My hope here tonight is that you will see that our community loves Mr. Chu, that we want him back in the classroom, and that we support him without reservation.
Ms. Brown? Ms. Brown? Hi.
Please put the best interests of our students at
I
the
allow
forefront
time for people. I
and
allow
reconsider your
additional
decision.
time for people that have a harder time getting here. Thank you.
Jason McLeod. Okay.
Hi, Mr. McLeod. Hi, Mr. McLeod.
Hey, how you doing? All right. Can you guys hear me?
We
It's kind
can.
of loud. All right, here we go. Hi, my name is Jason McLeod, MCL EOD. I am the head custodian for Lane and Green Thumb campuses and the custodial co-chair for SEIU. Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. Appreciate the time. So, custodians are angry and tired of the staffing crisis. It's been hard. We only have 210 custodians at night, minus 20% absenteeism, and PPS is averaging 2 custodians at night in each school. This is unacceptable. Imagine having 200 kids come into your house that don't care about it for 8 hours a day, and then not being able to clean the bathrooms and kitchen and other spaces properly for weeks or months on end. This is the state of our kids' schools. The solution to this problem is simple. Raise custodian wages so they're competitive. When PPS bus drivers were short-staffed and could not hire anyone, the school district or the school board approved a $3 raise for them. Their problem was addressed. I thank the school board for their action in authorizing 30 more custodian positions, but unfortunately, because our low wages, these positions are still not filled a year later. Do you know whose else's wages are not competitive? Nutritional service workers. As of July 1st this year, nutritional services will make less than minimum wage. This workforce is predominantly women. Do right by these hardworking women and give them a livable wage. McDonald's starts at more than minimum wage. We can do better. This is not a 90s R&B song request. We're not asking for the moon. In case you're wondering where I was going with that, PPS should provide livable wages to all of its employees. Nutritional service workers matter. Custodians matter. What you decide after this meeting matters. I just want to be able to afford some Captain Crunch, okay? I'm tired of buying my kids the off-brand Cheerios. This is my life. 15% of our members have public assistance. 20% of our members have to work 2 jobs to get by. And 35% say they can't afford to live in Portland. These struggles are real. We're here well before the pandemic. I don't know how schools could run without custodians and nutrition services, and I hope we don't have to find out. Thank you for hearing me. I look forward to these problems being addressed.
Thank you.
Virtually, we have Nick Christensen.
Hello.
Hello.
Directors, Student Representative Weinberg, Deputy Superintendent Hertz, thank you so much. Much like others, I'm asking for something today. Earlier today, I went to work, and it was my second day back in the office in 2 years, but it was cut short because I had to go back to East Portland to pick my kid up from school. I am fortunate to be one of the people who is still telecommuting mostly during the pandemic. Every morning at 8:30, I walk my daughter 6 blocks to Oliver Lent Elementary, and every afternoon at 3, I pick her up. Earlier this year, I was surprised to find out that of all of PPS's elementary schools, Oliver Lent is one of just 4 with no on-site after-school care. The other 3, Sitten, Cesar Chavez, and Rosa Parks, are in similarly low socioeconomic status communities. While Lent offers limited sun programming that is only available on certain days, and it is space limited, access is by need and by lottery. I know my school's principal has tried to make a connection with Campfire to offer after-school programming, but there are financial challenges to putting that kind of after-school program in a community with more than 95% eligible for free and reduced lunch. From what I've heard, it just doesn't pencil out to offer after-school programming at a campus that doesn't have enough students of means to offset the costs of offering a program at a discounted or free rate to families who need the assistance. I consider myself to be one of the lucky ones. My wife is a PPS teacher, so she can't help with drop-off or pickup, but I, at this point, have the flexibility to leave my office at about 2 and finish my workday after 3 from home. But I know there are plenty of other families in my kid's school where one parent has stopped working or has had to take some really challenging shifts in order to cover for childcare. I know there's not a magic wand that any of you can wave to fix this problem. I'm just here to make you aware of this situation and ask that you request specific follow-ups from Superintendent Guerrero and other leaders on the ability of PPS to provide after-school care to every family at every school that needs it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Also virtually is Chris Reiser.
Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you, Mr. Reiser.
Dear children of Harriet Tubman Middle School, my name is Chris Reiser, R-I-S-E-R, he, him pronouns. Dear children of Harriet Tubman Middle School, we love you, we see you, and we are here in solidarity with you. Dear PPS, we are calling upon you to stand on the right side of history, on the side of children over money and politics, though there's a healthy skepticism you ever will. PPS, whose central office is named for a racist superintendent, will not be remembered at this time for its racial equity and social justice practices. This period will be remembered as one of false scarcity, digitization, privatization, and the reproduction of white supremacy in new culturally and linguistically diverse forms. Further, PPS Human Resources seem to be actively ridding the district of the educator Sharon Reese just recognized in the resolution for Teacher Appreciation Week. For example, Monday, January 10th, at the height of the Omicron surge, a vast majority of staff at Ockley Green called out for various reasons, including positive COVID cases. On Wednesday, the 12th, 19 of us were placed under investigation, and Sharon Reese issued an email to all 4,000 PAT members warning us that coordinated action to be absent is an illegal work stoppage. PPS HR spent weeks investigating this and found nothing, but the resulting sense of institutional intimidation is still fresh. PPS HR prioritized having labor relations investigate educators during a global pandemic over ensuring, for example, that every school has a full-time principal. Because Ockley Green is still without a principal, or even a communication until just today about the principal hiring process as of this meeting. All of this impacts children because we now have several powerful, critical educators at Ockley moving on to other sites in search of institutional stability. Then there's Harriet Tubman, in their 4th year of startup, no permanent principal. They've been without 7 full-time educators across the curriculum because they had taken various leaves. This alone should have sent immediate alarm bells off for PPS. The middle school in PPS with one of the largest Black student populations and is named for one of the most rebellious and anti-establishment figures in American history, the famous fugitive from state and federal law, Minty, Harriet Tubman. And those 7 educators were already out before Brian Chu was put on leave. One of the greatest educators I've ever had the good fortune to observe, who has clearly impacted the lives of countless children and adults. How could one not feel safe and connected to an educator who sees you, your life and well-being as his assessment? Did PPS HR employ the PPS racial equity lens in this decision? How are Black and Native student groups affected? How will Black and Native students experience a greater sense of belonging? Are there any potential unintended consequences for other specific groups or populations? Are there strategies in place to mitigate any negative impacts? It doesn't appear that PPS HR checked its own racial equity policy in this decision. Students want their teacher back, and I stand in solidarity with the students, the community, and my mentor, colleague, and friend. So we're here demanding an end to even the appearance of silencing, targeting, intimidation, and retaliation per employment law. Brian Chu has served the students of Boise Elliott and now Tubman faithfully, diligently, and without respect for white supremacy in any of its many forms. He has shown up, even when you didn't expect or appreciate community input, to ask questions, make connections, and hold this district accountable for serving Black and brown students. We would all do well to get on his level. In the words of Coda the Friend, y'all selling out for the check, we holding out for the kids. Please reinstate Chu. It's an equity issue.
Thank you.
And then also virtually, we have Karanja Cruz.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for this time. Appreciate you. I know you guys as a board, you have to operate through board policy. So I just wanted to highlight a board policy for you. Hopefully you're taking notes, but I also wanted to note a non-response is a response. So a non-response is a response. So just because you don't respond, that means you are responding. So board policy 21001-P. It is the racial educational equity policy. In item number A, it says the district shall provide every student with equitable access to high quality and culturally relevant instruction. Let me repeat that. It says culturally relevant instruction. If you understand that pedagogy and understand the person who actually coined that term, who is one of my favorite scholars, Dr. Gloria Lasson-Billings, you will understand and do the research and learn that culturally relevant instruction is what Chu embodies. So basically what Mr. Chu and how he teaches, as you can well heard from the students and from parents, he is practicing culturally relevant instruction. So therefore, what I'm asking you as the board, I already stated these issues from the top of the year. You guys had voted on an inconclusive complaint that I already highlighted for you, but there was still no response. So this is well documented, so understand that. So also what I need you to understand, even though you're not going to respond today, hopefully you will respond tomorrow. We are asking, we need it's a state of an emergency, as you can hear, but we also need to plan for next year. So what I'm asking is a comprehensive planning session, maybe that would include some board members, so we can have a better next year. But in the meantime, we need to deal with the now. We need to bring Mr. Chu back right now. And we also need teachers in the building right now. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Cruz.
That concludes who we have signed up for public comment. I did get a message from the person who was on the consent agenda who said that their technical difficulties are over. Did we want to ask them to provide comment now or wait till the end?
If he's ready to provide it now, we'll go ahead and take it.
Okay. So James Tully. There we go.
James Tully. Mr. Tully, can you hear us?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, all. Thank you for having me. Apologies for the earlier delay. I wanted to say especially a thank you to Board Member Scott for earlier meeting with us last week virtually to discuss the PPS interdistrict transfer policy. As earlier speaker Sarah referred to, what we are looking for is I've heard the word a few times tonight in many of the different presenters, the word equity. I think it's a wonderful word, not to be used lightly. I feel like in this case with interdistrict policy, it is a token word of equity that we are not seeing and enacted in policy. We are requesting that similar to transfer out of district, we have very little recourse. There is basically no allowances that are similar to transfer to in district. In district is if you move, if there's other extenuating circumstances, but then there's a catch-all. 100 students can transfer into district, meeting none of the other criteria, which is fine, that's great. But why is that same provision not allowed for students to equitably leave the district? Why is there no catch-all for students for up to 100 to leave the district? I guess I'm just very confused. If you look at your own stats for the past 6 or 7 years, transfers into district in 2014-15, 634, out of district, 36, for a net gain of 600 students. Similar stats all the last 5-6 years, 350 in, 94 out, 250 in, 50 out. Every year is a net of 100 to 400 students net gain. I guess I'm just confused why students are not allowed to leave in a catch-all situation if they don't meet any of the other criteria. And it could be as simple as a lottery system where we have 100 spots to leave. If you're lucky enough to hit the number, then good. If you're not, then tough luck, so to speak. I guess I just don't understand a lack of equity. I do very much thank Member Scott for his transparency and meeting with us and saying, hey, you might not like the answers, but I'll try to get you some answers. So far, we haven't heard exactly what's behind this lack of equity in our thoughts. So if there's not going to be any changes to the current policy, let's just call it what it is and say that each student is basically assigned a dollar value. And PPS, while happy to take those dollar symbols in, is more reluctant to give those dollars back away to other districts. Liberal policies are abundant in neighboring districts, Clackamas, Lake Oswego. They're happy to release their students into PPS, but we, for some reason, are very reluctant to release our students with any sort of catch-all. So we encourage you to, if equity is something that we value as we keep using it tonight, and we've used it in the past, let's make it applicable and let's make it a reality and shown in our policy, not just a token phrase that we throw around.
Mr. Tully, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We allow everybody 3 minutes, and when you're virtual, I don't think you can hear the signal. But we've gotten the notes and I think have the gist of your testimony. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you all.
That concludes our public testimony. Thank you all for your comments. They're important to us, and if you have anything you'd like to follow up with, you're free to connect with our senior board manager, Roseanne Powell, if you have something specifically you'd like to follow up with the board office. Sorry, I'm a little bit lost trying to sign in. So the student representatives report, yes, I'm just trying to sign into my device. Not being very successful.
I can give a very short report. Just a thank you to all the public commenters, especially the students who came forward and gave their public comment. Thank you.
Authorizing, which is, yes, which is why I wanted to verify, so.
I had my agenda open, but I skipped that, so.
All help is welcome, even if it's wrong, but I appreciate the effort. That was very kind of you to try. We're now going to move to authorizing the agreement for the joint use of Portland Public Schools and Portland Parks and Recreation Athletic Facilities. Deputy Superintendent Hertz, I understand you're going to introduce this item?
Yes, thank you, Chair DePass. I would like to introduce, I'll give them a minute to come down. We have, I'd like to introduce Dana White, our Director of Planning and Real Estate Management.
You say Dana White?
Dana.
Okay.
D is in David, Dana White. Thank you.
I was expecting her to get up there and turn letters.
I'm old enough to remember that.
I don't know if Director Green is, though.
Oh, probably not.
Probably not.
So
I was thinking letters.
So now you've met Dana White. I'm going to go ahead and introduce the rest.
Go
Great,
ahead.
thank you. Marshall Haskins, Senior Director of Athletics. Good to see you, Marshall. And Dylan Paul from Portland Parks and Recreation. They will be presenting the agreement tonight.
Thank you. I believe you have the materials in your packets, and we do have a brief presentation that we can go through quickly. And I think, Cara, do you have that pulled up? No? Okay.
It's, yeah, it is in the packet.
It is in the packet, okay.
She'll load it for us so we
Okay.
can all review it together.
All right, that sounds great. Good. Oh, there we go.
Okay.
Great. So tonight, what we're bringing forward to you is the first of two parts of our agreement that we're working on with Portland Public Parks. And several months ago, actually almost 2 years ago, we engaged in this dialogue with Parks, and we engaged Eco Northwest to come in and help us understand where are we, what's going on, how do we make this relationship more fruitful and beneficial for both parties and for the community as a whole. One of the recommendations was that we bifurcate the athletic agreement with the real estate agreement. So what you're seeing tonight is the athletic agreement between ourselves and Parks. Next slide, please. So the purpose of this is really an exchange of asset use. Parks needs gyms, we need golf courses, pools, fields, things like that we don't have. So we are worked very hard to try and exchange the use of those assets. Next slide. This is the negotiation team. You can see on PPS was myself and Kirsten Cowden and Marshall's group who did a tremendous amount of heavy lifting to get this over the finish line. And at PPR, Dylan Paul, as Deputy Hertz mentioned, is here with us, and his team working very hard on putting this whole thing together. Next slide. This is the process outline. I won't read the whole thing to you because I know you can all read. But we've gone through for the last, almost 2 years, a really detailed evaluation of where are we, where have we been, what do we want this to look like in the future. Let's put the past behind us and move forward. And so this is what we've come up with for today. We did take this then to the Facilities and Operations Committee, and now we're bringing it to you all, and it's scheduled to go to City Council here in May. Next slide. Our key issues were really around modifying the hours of use on our practice fields. There was a bell schedule change, and I know Marshall can answer more questions about that than I can. But this was a big shift for us and a big shift for Parks because it really changes what they have to offer for the community when we change our hours. So they did the best they could to accommodate us in as many places as possible. We wanted to make sure that we had sort of a priority use for their fields. We had some concerns about the use agreements where they're third parties, like soccer at Buckman. I know everybody knows that particular example. And we have some constraints at area facilities like Dunaway Park and some things where they're just really overused and we have trouble getting on there. Next slide. So what changed in this new agreement is we did get the hours of use at most of the fields that we requested. We have a 3-year commitment for both parties, and you'll see in your Appendix A, it's by location, day, hour, it is the nitty gritty, and so you can imagine a lot of people put hundreds and hundreds of hours into this. Parks significantly reduced the number of fields of hours that they are utilizing, opening those back up for the general public. Each party committed that any material change in a jointly used facility, like sponsorship or a big construction project, that we would talk to each other before that happens, so that we weren't blindsided by things like that in the future. And then we had made a commitment that each of us would prioritize our jointly used assets that we both use in terms of our capitalization. Next slide. We created a joint management team for oversight and for dispute resolution. One of the things that we noticed did not happen with the 2010 agreement was really that ongoing relationship, really building that strong trust and that ability to try to work things out. And I think we've come a long way, and now we have a framework for that. Like I said, we have outlined all of the uses for both parties to the degree that there are additional uses that may come up. And certainly if there are direct expenses, for example, custodial, that are out-of-pocket expenses, we will pay each other for those. This agreement covers 3 years. It's a rolling agreement, but we've now been able to codify for the next 3 years our needs and as has Parks, so that we can then permit those and make schedules for teams. At the end of 2 years, we'll look at it again. And I know Marshall can't wait for that. He's very excited. Look at the joy on his face. And then if we have any material programmatic changes that we would give each other 2 years notice. So we would have a chance to talk about that. If Parks needs for a funding source to try to go to a third party, let's talk about that first and see if we can do something together, because we both agree that we would prefer, while not improving each other's assets, we would really prefer to work together rather than a third party. Next slide. So the next steps are the presentation we did to Facilities and Operations last week. And then tonight we are with you, hoping that we can get your approval. Dylan has scheduled City Council for May 18th. And then as soon as we have everybody's blessing, then we will talk about how we communicate this and begin the negotiations for our real estate agreement. And I think that's the last, Cara, I think that's the, is there one more? Yeah, questions. So.
Does the board, I have a question as the Facilities Committee, Director Hollins, did you have any thoughts about the presentation you heard earlier?
Yes, I did, and I expressed some of those concerns at the facilities meeting. But I wanted to make sure that the rest of the board had some input on the issue. One of the big issues that I had was the fact that it seems like two organizations, when you look at the times with some of these agreements, it pushes out any community groups to have use of facilities out at a later time. And that's one of the things that I had mentioned at the Facilities and Operations Committee as well. I don't know exactly what could or should be done about that. I don't know if that's a policy, a policy at PPS that we look at to make the CUB process a little bit more favorable. And I'm only speaking from, coming from a place of trying to access CUB processes before. And so looking at that, to me, it just looks like it squeezes out everyone else and just makes way for PPS and Portland Parks. When we look at other things, like when we talk about agreements where other organizations are putting money in, for instance, Buckman, where you have other organizations who puts in money in, the way I look at it, as an investment for their kids. They get access to it. Unfortunately, PPS hasn't done that yet as far as putting investments into stuff, because Buckman's track that Benson High School still uses is still not fixed. I don't know if that's a PPS issue or a Parks issue, but I know it's a kid issue that hasn't been done since I've been running on it when I was in high school. And so when we look at these type of agreements, I just want to make sure that we are keeping our kids' interest, all of our kids, not just PPS kids, not just the kids that the programs that Parks uses for, but all of our kids. So, I'm back and forth on. I think it's great that we're getting more access for our kids, but once again, I think I don't know how we can maneuver this around so that way it's not just for our kids, but other community kids and other clubs that handle our kids when PPS doesn't, or when Parks doesn't, to be able to have access to these facilities as well. And I still want to know, I'm glad we got the Parks guy here, what we're going to do about Buckman's track.
I got a question. Well,
I want to get an answer though.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I hear you clearly.
So I think we represent kind of a continuum within Portland of, I think, all sports across the city, and we really create an amazing access. We have a problem with having more asks than we have available resources. We also have a hard time maintaining the resources once we build them. We have trouble funding them, we have trouble maintaining them, and so there's a right mix that I think we've tried a lot of different solutions. We're getting better at it. I don't think we have the answer today for how to make this all work. So there is a balance, I think, to be had. This agreement represents, I think, a future for us where we're working more together to meet those challenges over, I think, a more noble trajectory. But I don't know that we have the answers for how to fix some of the failing infrastructure. But it is, I think, paramount to us as well.
So as you talk about working together, is that a way we can work together to get that track fixed?
Bringing it home.
I think where there are sites where our properties overlap, we are bound. We have very similar missions, though some of our mission alignment is often, as we grow as entities and we become more unique, some of those have created conflicts. So one of the things we seek to do is to create new solutions rather than just using the old tools. So where you have a track that is adjacent to a PPS site, how do we ensure that the right resources are always on that, right? So when it's completely within one group's portfolio, it limits the amount of options available. So we don't generally want to improve each other's properties because it creates a more complicated equation, but some sites we're going to be either coupled together forever, or we're going to work out some sort of a different solution that we haven't come up with yet.
Okay, so help me understand, because I like the political correct answer that you gave, but like for the kids that's running track, that track has been in disarray for like almost 20 years. That's not a real acceptable answer for them and the fields that they have to use. So when we talk about these agreements, is there a maintenance and upkeep proponent to this agreement as well?
So this agreement primarily was about the exchange of available resources. The next part is going to be harder, and it will talk a little bit more about some of the assets. So I would expect that we will work to solve some of those issues. Historically, a lot of these assets have failed pretty severely before there was enough support to fund the repair. It's not something that deferred maintenance, I think, haunts us all, right? So I hope that we find the solution for some of these sites that are most critical to us. Though in my experience, most of these sites that are high use do have solutions that present themselves. Normally it comes in the 11th hour. I'd like to do better, but we only have what we have to work with at present.
So with the new parks bond that has passed, would that help provide other funds? Because I look at my property tax bills, and I'm loving the fact that we're investing in it, but I need to see that action on the ground.
I wish we could use it for capital improvements. It's primarily, or it's solely for operations, so it doesn't allow for capital projects.
But that do free up because you're not spending your budget on capital improvement. Don't that free up capital improvement dollars?
It filled in our deepest ravines. So it brought service levels back up to a minimum bar, though it did expand some programming that was new and different. But I can tell you that as far as diverting resources, it would be, I think, fair to say that we won't be finding extra money at the end of each year.
So that's my comment.
That was, I appreciate that.
I just want to throw that out there for the record because I don't do politics, but that was a political no.
Okay.
So.
That's all right.
Okay. We're going to go to Director Brim Edwards. We're going to go to Director DePass. We're going to go down the line.
All right, let's go.
I think you have something to say too. Go ahead, please.
So I had sort of three general lines of questions. One, really applaud the district for starting and expanding middle school sports, which we didn't have before. And one of the results of that is increased usage because we have, you know, in a good way, more of our students out practicing. And I'm wondering if, this is my first question, as part of this agreement, we've have increased use of our own facilities, or, because I know like when my kids were in middle school, at a Title I school, other schools use their gym, but they didn't get to use it. So I just want to make sure that we, in this agreement, for all of our middle school programs, are utilizing, you know, if your kids go to a school, they've got a middle school sports that's PPS, that they're getting to use their own gym or field, if that's the case. So that's my first question.
Yes. I'm not going to speak for Dylan, but his predecessor would say that we took the fields back and the gyms back. So I feel confident that we, through this agreement, have what we need for middle school. I'd be remiss if I didn't say that part of our problem is that some of our middle schools are not adequate. So when we had Kellogg, for example, we had 2 gymnasiums there and we had 2 athletic fields. We built a new school, we have 1 gym and no athletic fields. So part of our lack of resource is that we created. I do, but within the agreement, I think we moved past part of the language in the agreement. In the past agreement was that the agreement only addressed high school athletics, that was PIL. Now the agreement addresses PPS. So we use our facilities for whatever we need, whether it be club sports and or PIL or PIL youth sports.
Great, because there was nothing worse than getting kicked out of your own gym by a non-school team. The second question I have is somewhat related to Director Hollins, and sort of the maintenance and the capital is, as we think ahead to our next bonds, and we make, if we choose to make very deliberate investments in our capital facilities, as is contemplated in the long-range facilities plan, how is that a separate agreement, or are we planning on any sort of like parks and PPS going out at the same time because we have this issue, and then we could take care of Director Holland's track? So I'm just thinking about how, because to me, I see it's like we're going to be less scarcity and more, as Director Green always likes to talk about, abundance. How do you see that, and how would that disagreement, are we getting ourselves locked in, or is there the possibility of future cooperation? And
well, I think there's always opportunity for collaboration, and I think at a level above mine, there needs to be a conversation about how do we look at athletic facility across our city. There's not enough, even if we, as Director Holland said, if we take what we need for PIL and for clubs within PIL and for unified sports within PPS, and then Portland Parks does the programming they do, there's always going to be the mom and pop programs that are going to spring up that's going to say, hey, I want to do AU basketball, or I want to do ASA softball. And so since we know we need more, and if we look at the suburban schools outside of us, you can see what unfortunately, we get to see what it looks like. Like literally, we're renting Hoodview, which is North Clackamas, one of their high schools' facilities, to play softball because we have no turf softball field, so it's all rained out, right? So we know what it looks like. So I think it would be great to have some type of collaboration with Portland Parks so that we could have some better facilities for the city. The second part of your question, as I hear it, is, will we have enough for ourselves? Well, I think that part of the agreement is, as high school facilities, we don't normally use CUBs for outside users because we use them all, right? So then the question becomes for youth sports and middle schools and elementary schools, as we build them, do we build them to capacity thinking about athletics, or is athletics secondary? So got to put it out there, I'm acting like Director Hollins now. So in our previous bond, we had $35 million allocated for athletics. The bond basically doubled and we went to 0. So I would hope that in the next bond there could be some prioritization of athletic facilities that then could be used by us, Portland Parks, and then the city of Portland as a whole.
That wasn't a complete setup for you, but
It was.
You did a nice
I
job.
hope I hit it on the park. That's why I come.
And then my last question is, and this is as a parent of a female PIL athlete, is who often didn't ever practice or play on her home in her home school because that's where the boys practiced. I'm wondering if we've done an analysis of just how these are divided up and whether we've looked at it through the lens of Title IX, of like who's practicing where, or, and I guess that'd be most like softball, baseball, or just how it gets divided up. And maybe that's not part of this use agreement, but maybe it is, because there's an awful lot of parks facilities that girls' teams use that aren't near the school.
Well, I don't think it was intentionally a part of the agreement. I will say that we have had a couple Title IX situations occur, including Grant as our latest, that has forced us to move beyond where we were. Even at Grant, we perceived that as a multi-purpose field when it was built. It was built, and softball said they didn't want to be at Grant. They wanted to have a whole dirt because they had someone who had been an Olympic softball player who believed that softball shouldn't be played on turf. So we proceeded down that road. I think that the lesson we've learned is that from my office, we need to look at it through that lens of Title IX all the time. No one's going to have girls get to say they want to be somewhere else. You don't get that option anymore. We're going to build it with all of those things in mind. An example would be, we were talking yesterday about Lincoln with their project manager, and I was like, okay, tell me where the lacrosse lines for girls are. Tell me where they are for boys. They both need to be on this field, whether the girls want to play here or not, because we can't go 5 years down the road and then someone say, we don't have the girls here on campus. Why isn't that so? So we have learned some lessons that I think that is going to make us better stewards of our facilities and certainly in compliance with not only Title IX, but doing what's right for kids. I think that's at the forefront, that kids should come first and prioritizing what their needs are, short and long term.
Thank you. I had questions about whether or not there was a community oversight board with both entities to talk about things such as Director Hollins mentioned. That was one question. Also, I worked for the Parks Bureau for a long time, managing bond construction projects, and the fields are challenging. The dog parks are very, very, very challenging. So I know there's, as we urbanize and get our city grows, that we're going to have more demand for fields. And so I was curious to explore this time of use from 3 to 6 to 4 to 7 and how that impacts PPS kids versus the community. And then my last question has to do with sports equity and just a question of whether we're investing as much in sports such as track and basketball as we are in lacrosse and soccer fields as a community.
So is that three-parter?
It's kind of a three-parter. Yeah, it was about community oversight, whether there was a joint PPS, PPR oversight board, or if that was a consideration. Was curious about the time of use and how that impacted PPS kids versus the community at large. And then just curious about the sports equity, if we consider investments in sports such as track and basketball, as compared to lacrosse and soccer. So it's who's playing what sports, right. And do we invest equally in all of our facilities?
I'll answer them in reverse, and I'll let Dylan and Dana answer the first question. So in regards to our investment in individual or particular sports like lacrosse, we have PIL athletics. Lacrosse isn't one of those. They're considered a club sport. And in our district, and some other districts, they consider them a part. So they're part of their budget and those things. We do support them in a way, but technically they're not ours. But when we do build fields, turf fields, they are considered and they are used. In terms of Do we have a robust 6 through 12 lacrosse program that's sanctioned, supported with resources from PPS? No, we don't. There is a move right now internally to bring all sports to my office, so whether you're club sports or not, so then we could ensure perhaps more opportunities for kids who want to do those non-traditional sports. Track is a traditional sport, so I'd say lacrosse, ski, not skateboarding, snowboarding, rugby. Those would probably be the major ones that are not PIL sports. And then in terms of access for any population, I think bringing it in-house increases the probability that those things will happen. Currently, those things are by choice at clubs based on what kids at a particular school want to have. We do have kids who are participating in clubs that are not at their school. So there's kids who, like Franklin, plays Cleveland lacrosse because Cleveland doesn't have it, or Franklin doesn't have it. We have a rugby team that's kind of almost like all-city rugby team that practices at Roosevelt, but all the schools don't have rugby. I do think at some point in time, given the resource to do it, I think we would like to provide that opportunity across the city.
I think I would say in terms of the oversight group, right now that consists of our two groups. I will say that Parks relinquished about half of the fields that they had been reserving, so quite a few fields have opened up after that. As we go forward and we start looking at maybe the longer term use and how we plan in the future to accommodate the community and our growing needs, getting additional community input would be really valuable. So, totally agree.
And then your third question, which was about the time change.
Time of use, yes, because I'm building on Director Holland's question about who gets what and what the impact of that 1 hour shift.
Since Director Hollins was in school before me, when he was in school, school got out at 2 o'clock.
Long time ago.
So school got out at 2 o'clock. So this agreement was you got out at 2. So if we got the parks from 3 to 6, that made sense. Well, now schools are out at 3:30. So now it's a problem. Even from 4 to 7 is really to be a problem, to be honest, just because you kids are going to have to leave school. We're really concerned right now that in the spring, tennis, softball, baseball, we've rained out pretty much the last 2 weeks, right? Anticipating more rain the next couple of days. So we're behind. And the only way you catch up is you're going to have to play the games earlier in the day to play places that have turf in order to get them, for that to happen, which means kids might be out of class a little earlier than normal to get to somewhere to play so they can get their games in. The backside of that is at several of the sites, we were there at 6, we finished at 6, and there was no one behind us anyway. So I think that those sites, it was easy to give us to 7. I think there are other sites where literally at Benson for their soccer club, when it's 5:59 and 59 seconds, they're going, it's our field, here's a permit, get out of the way. So it's a balancing act. I don't think that we were intentionally trying to displace any place, especially for baseball, softball, because the youth programs, baseball and softball, are actually our youth programs. That's part of why Park Bureau's upset with us, because we brought them in to say we want a 6 through 12 program rather than maybe someone has a program and maybe someone doesn't. When we start calling them PIL, youth sports, then the permit really is we get done at 6 and then our youth sports go right after us, right? So that's how we've kind of set it up. So some of it is language, but I don't think we, at any site, did we displace anyone that's connected to us or Little League or ASA softball, any of those things to get to 7 o'clock.
Okay, and I understand the challenge of scheduling the fields, as a Little League parent. There's somebody right behind you and it's all evening. Those were my questions. Thank you.
You want to go ahead, Herman?
I think some of my questions got answered. When I'm looking at how this works, I want to ask a question. One is, I had two, the community oversight, which she brought up. Like, I know that we're involved and they're involved, but when I think about our fields and how the community is using them, and have we brought the community into play to say, how is this going to work out for everybody involved? And I say that specifically thinking about Roosevelt, as where we have a strong, Marshall probably knows the folks that come up on Saturday, every Saturday, been doing it religiously since the field opened, to play soccer. It's an older adult league and so how does something like this displace a group like that, if it does at all, or maybe it doesn't? And so if you could just speak to that for me, I would appreciate that. And then with our gyms, with this agreement, and I think of the gym specifically because, we have a lot of youth programs, but we also have community programs that use our gyms for different things. And so with this relationship with parks, that in turn not afford some of them to have access to the gyms during times, because parks has reserved that time for the space. And then my last question, is really for, we're all here, trying to get this, but I just tell me why I hate this, Marshall. I want you to tell me why I hate this. And so, because it's easy to get up there and say why we should sell it, but I feel like in every debate, we need to understand both sides of it. And so I'm asking you to tell me why I hate this. Otherwise, I'm going to go back and figure out why I hate this. And I'm going to
At our last meeting, I spent a lot of time telling him why I hate this.
Yeah,
and then he told me why I shouldn't hate it so much.
So, it's hard, but you guys ask these really hard, long, 8-part questions. I got to try to keep track here.
Well, we're a Warner alumni, so I know that you're educated enough to handle all them things.
Okay,
That's my guy since way back.
Okay.
He knew this was a long, loaded question when I stood
did.
up as a preacher.
Yeah,
He knew
that's
this.
True. That's true. So, well, what I would say is, in any negotiation, you never get all that you want. Let's just start with that, right? So we didn't get all that we wanted. Because if it was up to me, we would use our fields all the way until every PPS kid said, I'm done. Then I go, PPS, good luck, right? But so in the spirit of collaboration, I think we got what we needed. I would be remiss if I didn't say that I am upset about a couple sites that have not been taken care of. I guess Benson is an example. I'm not happy about some of the agreements that they have with outside users that we were not prioritized, again, like Benson and Buckman, the soccer club. I would say that those would probably be the two big ones, wouldn't it? Probably that. Oh, and the fact that we don't have pools or golf courses or tennis courts, we're totally dependent on them. I mean, honestly, we are. I mean, we have, in the spirit of trying to grow programming, tennis used to be a 12-person team. We have teams that are 36 because we want kids who want to be engaged and participate. So we need to use Gabriel Park because it has 8 courts, right? But at Cleveland, they got 2 courts. At Marshall, they got 1 court. So just us not having enough causes some angst in the relationship because we need more than they have to give. So that's why I would hate. Oh, one other. And then they do have, kind of in line with that, they do have places we really, really wish we'd have. And I see Amy, I think about Dunaway, because it's closer to Lincoln than where we are going to have Lincoln go to do some things. But at the end of the day, we have some high schools that are on some land that there's no land around it. So we're going to have to travel anyway, right? Make the best of it. In regards to the people who want to use PPS facilities, I don't think there's going to be less use for them. I think that actually the use is going to be greater from PPS because Portland Parks is using less than they used to use. I do know for a fact that there's permitting and then there's using. So the people that permit our fields, I think they're, for the most part, pretty happy. The users just show up. And if we're not there to put them off, they're there. And so I'll use Marshall campus as an example. We've had an adult soccer league out there every Sunday for probably the whole time I've been here, right? Because they go there, there's a track, we leave the track open for community use, and then the turf field's there. Why wouldn't we use it, right? So, so there are permittees and then there are users. So I think that we're not gonna, the user piece is not gonna get solved. I don't think we're ever gonna, because if we put someone out there till 5 o'clock, they come at 6. If we put them at 6, they come at 8, right? They don't have the ability to turn the lights on, so that's probably our only time they wouldn't use our fields. In terms of gyms, I don't think we'll ever have enough gyms. Right now, I think Park Bureau is, I wouldn't say happy, but satisfied. I think we're satisfied, but not thrilled, right? And then the users, I think, become seasonal. So you have gym time during your peak season of high school basketball, right? But then after that, it's just about permitting. People just need to learn the process and come permit. There's gyms, there's availability, and they do that. I think the same thing with volleyball. I think Park Bureau does volleyball in the fall, then they're turning to do it in the spring, and then and that's only half of the use normally of gym, so there's gyms available for people. Perhaps the question would be, outside users, do they know the process, and have we communicated that to them in a way that I'm Johnny and I want to start a program for girls basketball. I want to use Jefferson's gym. How do I do that? Maybe they don't know how to do that, so they're complaining they don't have access because they just show up. So perhaps we can do a little bit better about educating the community as a whole as to how to access would be the answers to those.
Or perhaps even just, Portland Parks puts out a comprehensive seasonal schedule for community members. I wonder if there's a way.
And I guess I'd add one other part. I think that the people who play AAU basketball or people who want to play basketball, use the gyms, volleyball or basketball, they're either in Park Bureau, they're in our PLU sports program, or they're AAU, right? AAU has always had to go find their gyms. There's no way for us to take care of all of them. Smart AAU programs are in their program part of the time, they're in our program part of the time, and they're double dipping on gym use. That's how it has to happen. There's no other way around it.
And why you hate this agreement is that nobody wants to say no, especially not to youth, and certainly not to other community members who live nearby a park or a school. The reality is that you have a pretty amazing team of good negotiators that actually, this is about as good as it gets. So why you love it is that we've maximized the benefit. We could use twice as many of your gyms. There are barriers that we have to work through in order to be able to do those things. There will always be parties that are displaced when we change hours. What we've learned is that community engagement around projects is amazing. Community engagement around policy is amazing. Oftentimes in difficult negotiations where there's not enough, it's tricky. We have different stakeholders to bring to those sorts of things. So I don't know that would be an amazing fit between two separate entities. But I will say that as we look towards the future, we know that lights and synthetic turf extend usable play hours. So they are a priority for us moving forward. They're also more expensive to replace. They're cheaper to maintain. So oftentimes you forget about those. So having a consistent approach to expanding and growing with the growing need of our region of new and different sports. We can't build, 60 gyms that we need to use. We would never be able to afford that on our own. And we offer different assets that may not be economical for schools to maintain. But as two regional entities, I think we're maximizing value, but there's always going to be more work to do. But investing in different resources to the overall benefit, I think is what we're looking to do in some capacity. But it's going to take resources as well, and commitment, and we're in the meantime, we're going to say no to some groups because we have to prioritize, in line with our unique missions, and to make sure that we have a full range of sports. I mean, as a region, if you can't start off in youth play and go all the way up, right, then then we have gaps, right? And so, is that the most important thing, or is having the most youth programming available? We debate this every day, at Portland Parks, and we don't have the answer, but I think that being curious about it and expanding that and focusing on the type of improvements that, you know, meet the larger needs of the region as well as our own, and when possible, doing them on our own property to make sure that we have that priority use already built in, I think it's gonna be critical for the future. But you have a great team. They got a lot of great compromises from our sports team who worked very hard with them. So I'm proud to be, you know, here tonight and also to be sitting next to your staff who, I think they did amazing, so.
I think the other, can I just say one?
Yes.
One thing? There's things important. I think Julia, Director Brent Edwards, raised a good point about what are things we could collaboratively talk about at a level way higher than mine. That, like for us, the fact that, like I said before, we're going to Hoodview and North Clackamas to play softball games. To Parkville's credit, they've done everything they can to try to make Delta Park playable for us, but it's wet, it's been raining, right? So a great collaborative project might be that, how do we help them do something to get turf fields at Delta Park so that we can be there? Same thing with more turf fields at Delta Park that we use for soccer. A lot of times when we build our high school facilities, the thought is, wow, we got a softball, baseball complex at Grant, we've taken care of it. Well, that's for one team. But Grant has 3 baseball teams, or maybe 4. They have 2 or 3 softball teams. Where are the other teams gonna go play? And then now we have a situation where we're gonna take care of varsity because they go to the playoffs or whatever, but JV might lose 3/4 of their season because there's nowhere to play because of rain. So how we could work to collaborate to upgrade each other's facilities so it's more access for kids would be the last part of that question.
And they should all get raincoats, and we should all be playing in the rain.
On turf.
On turf, yes, so it doesn't tear the sports fields up. Okay, and then we're gonna, after your comment.
I want
we're
to
gonna wrap
help
this up.
conclude this conversation, but first, I do appreciate like an obviously greater sense of collaboration here, which I think is going to be helpful for our kids moving forward. I think the reason that this conversation is so hard and that we've spent so much time on it is because we have a real scarcity of resources, which is really bad for our community. And to me, it's a bad reflection of our community that we're not investing in our kids. And it'll take some responsibility, you know, in terms of not prioritizing athletic resources in our bonds. I will also say that for a long time, I think Portland Parks and Rec has really de-emphasized the recreation and athletic aspect of their mission, and just really underinvested in these resources for our kids. So to the extent that we can all come together and try to really increase these opportunities for our kids, I just think it's hugely important. I think that, you know, there are funds available now where people are trying to address our epidemic of community violence, and I think athletic resources is a response to this very this moment that we're in that is so terrible to live through and is taking so many of our children. So I think we should be creative in that sense and looking at all different kinds of resources. Specifically with this agreement, I am going to be very interested in the real estate discussions. I think there still may be some potential swaps that could make sense for us in terms of actual ownership. I also think there may be some underutilized properties that we both own that could be put into play, pun intended, if with a little bit of investment, we could make them usable for our kids, spaces that aren't usable. I certainly have my eyes on ones that are owned by the Parks Bureau, but you guys might have your eyes on some that are owned by us as well. So I think that should be an important part of that conversation. And then just to the last point, I was told in this agreement that the clause that in the previous MOU that stated that public school students had first priority to publicly funded Parks and Rec properties is coming out, or maybe renegotiated in the real estate agreements, and that the current agreements with third parties, will move forward and that those third parties are likely to have an opportunity to renegotiate those same agreements, those parties that have invested in parks facilities? Is that true?
So I think if you're referring to Buckman, the party there executed their last term from a deal that was negotiated several decades ago. So
Okay.
there's no field that I'm aware of where there's any unilateral right to extend.
Or what about places like Dunaway where it wasn't from an original investment, but it's just an existing agreement that it brings revenue into Portland Parks?
I think what we have is a really mixed history around trying to keep fields open. So most of these came out of fields that failed where there was no revenue at the time from any party. And there was an opportunity to activate that field. Some of those agreements, I think, worked well. Others worked less well.
Yeah.
I think that as we move forward, we're looking for things that are sustainable over the long run. So having an initial investment, but then having it, be returned in the same state is never ideal. So we're always looking at how do we provide, at a minimum, access. How do we make sure that our regional partners are involved with those decisions as we move forward? Because the only way to get there is together. We need to coordinate our resources regionally in order to be successful. So
I agree.
I think that it's a difficult question to ask because it's site dependent based off of the history and former commitments, but we are looking towards having a far more collaborative process around solutions, problem solvings for these sites. So I think you hit on a couple of really smart points for this next section with how do we make sure that the right management and ownership exists where the sites are so heavily dependent on programs that are adjacent or active at that site.
I like the sound of what you just said, and I like the notion of having public-private partnerships or where we're getting some investment into our public facilities. What I don't like is double dipping on part of the public entity where the taxpayers are paying for the underlying asset and then tax-paying citizens are having to pay again to use them, or they're being displaced by for-profit entities that are paying to use taxpayer-funded properties. That's a piece that I think has to go away.
Yeah, I would agree that a deal like that today would not go forward.
Have a deal like that at Dunaway Park with it's not well, maybe with some for-profits clubs, soccer clubs, as well as St. Mary's private institution, but not public schools, which by our previous contract, which was in place until about 5 minutes hence from now, was supposedly prioritized public school students. So that's a total violation.
I appreciate the comments, and we've got 2 more questions. I'm going to ask the people that have questions if it could be answered in an email because I'm trying to move the conversation along.
So the answer,
and student representative,
go
and
ahead.
You asked first, but I just...
The answer is yes, so but go ahead and
it
answer.
can be answered
My
in an
very
email.
quick question, it's going to be a yes or no question, is I've seen in my own school and other schools a prioritization of certain sports, especially when seasons overlap for those sports. Does the amount of time, 4 to 7, allow for flexibility for sports using like the same gym?
Yes.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
And my question can be answered by email, but it revolves around sport being a tool for inclusion, and between PPS and the City of Portland, who owns sort of the United teams, which are, okay, you can tell me how this agreement supports that by email.
So this is really just 30 seconds. Right now, no one owns
He
it.
violated it.
Because it's easy. No
We're
one
all
owns
complicit.
it. No one owns it this year. Next year, PIO Athletics will own it.
Okay. I want to thank staff for your input in Portland Parks and Rec. Always a Parkie. I worked under Charles Jordan. He was amazing. Anyway, I appreciate you and the work that's got into this, and look forward to a healthy collaboration in the future.
Thanks.
So do I have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 6488 authorizing the agreement between, for the joint use of Portland Public Schools and Portland Parks and Recreation athletic facilities?
So moved.
Second.
On cue. Director Green moves and Director Brim Edwards seconds the adoption of Resolution 6488. I want to make sure we hear from our student representative on what his thoughts are, and then we'll ask for, I think we had our board discussion. Do you have additional thoughts to share, Student Representative Weinberg?
Nope, that's all. Thank you.
And Ms. Bradshaw?
More swimming pools.
Do we have any public comment, Ms. Bradshaw?
No.
Okay, the board will now vote on Resolution 6488, authorizing the agreement for the joint use of Portland Public Schools and Portland Parks and Recreation athletic facilities. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
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 All opposed, please indicate by saying no. And are there any abstentions? Resolution 6488 passes, is approved by a vote of 7-0 with Student Representative Weinberg voting.
Yes.
Great. We're going to skip over the Student Representative's report. Thank you. So we can move through this. Board and committee conference reports. Do we have brief updates? Anything burning?
Intergovernmental is canceled this month, CS in May.
Excellent. Thank you for your brevity there. Director Green?
Nothing to report at this time.
Director Scott? Director Brim Edwards?
There's a policy committee meeting tomorrow, and I would just flag for board members that we're going to be discussing the Climate Crisis Committee application and charter, so that will be coming to the board, but we're looking for people to send that out. And then second, while we have the calendar vote later on tonight, there'll be a discussion about the issue that Director Constam, the students, and the student representative raised at the last committee meeting. Oh, sorry, the last board meeting.
All right. Director Hollins, did you have a report on facilities and operations?
Yeah, so the recommendation for the sports facilities with the partnership with Parks was the main one that we talked about at the Facilities and Operations Committee. We had a update on modernization reports as well. That was it.
Excellent. Thank you. Director Constam, anything for audit?
No report.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for your brevity. We're now going to move to the resolution to approve the school district calendar. We'll vote on the 2022-23 school year calendar. At our last meeting, we heard public testimony from 3 students at Ida B. Wells Barnett High School to consider a change in practice to assure that we are inclusive of the diversity of students and the religious holidays and cultural events they observe, and are requesting that the district avoids conflicts for students to the best of its ability so that students do not have to make tough choices between school and religious observances. And that was a very long sentence. I'm not sure who wrote that. It wasn't I. Yes, it was hard. Tonight I propose that we, that was a long sentence. Yeah. No criticism there, just long. So tonight I propose that we move forward adopting a calendar for the upcoming school year so that families can begin making plans and allow for the more thoughtful discussion to be worked through at the board's policy committee. I believe the policy committee chair, Brim Edwards, has already placed this on the agenda for tomorrow's meeting, as she mentioned. And so I'm going to ask now if I have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 6487. That's the resolution to approve the 2022-23 school district calendar.
So moved.
Second.
Director Green moves, Director Constam seconds the adoption of Resolution 6487. Is there any board discussion?
Just briefly, were you not finished?
I was I'm trying to change my practice so that we hear from the student representative first and adults second.
I'm all for that.
It's not performative, it's really to inform the adults in the room on the student perspective, so.
Yeah, my only comment is I appreciate that we're actually moving forward on the talking about the calendar and willing to go through an engagement process instead of kind of just making the decision up here without further engagement about what religious or cultural observances are we putting on there, what exactly are we going to do with this either resolution or policy, saying like what is not allowed or what is discouraged during those days, and then what it looks like for students who end up missing those days. Makeup work, tests, after school, sporting events, and all that. So I appreciate that.
I just want to add, we kind of arrived at the path of going to the policy committee for that, through the leadership of Jackson and Oscar Calvert and Xander Levine, who are really going to take the lead on this issue in terms of addressing how the calendar might have notations around other special days of observances that won't affect the instructional hours or the days of the year that kids are in school. So I want to thank our student leaders for that and thank Liz Large for helping us chart the path, and we're good to go.
And I'm very enthusiastic about addressing the issue too, understanding that we have a broad diversity of cultural traditions and requirements from Shabbat to Ramadan, and our addressing those issues will help us attract staff and administrators as well, teachers included, that want to be able to, show up as their full selves without fear of losing their positions or whatever. So, Ms. Bradshaw, is there any public comment?
No.
Any additional discussion?
I wanted to thank the staff for their willingness to look at this for next year. Just as I mentioned at the last meeting, this has been a perennial issue for the last 2 decades, and I'm glad we didn't just say we'll do it next year, but we'll take some tentative steps because I think that's really important to move ahead now and to do it thoughtfully. I also am appreciative that there's an openness to look at actually having the dates on the calendar or some mechanism that more than just the principal gets the information, because as we all know, as active school community members, lots of people schedule things, individual teachers, coaches, external parties, and I really think we need to make sure that for it to actually have its intended impact, that it needs to be sort of anchored into the base calendar. So I want to just thank all parties for being open to having the discussion this year versus waiting till next year. And I'm going to support the calendar this year based on that.
Thank you. The board will now vote on resolution 6487, resolution to approve. I apologize.
No worries. I have a quick question. So the calendar we are voting on now, I want to make sure I'm asking the right question. If the calendar changes for any reason, do we go back and change it, or is this what it's going to be for 2022, 2023?
I think that we're proposing that in the policy committee that if we do come up with changes, that we would adopt them next year. Is that correct?
So, and this is my interpretation,
Asking the
is
wrong
that
person?
sort of the first, and from talking to the students or communicating with the students who were here last meeting, is that it wouldn't actually add no school days, but that it might impact what can be scheduled, and then how students who may be absent, how those are treated. So it wouldn't actually impact this additional calendar day or the school year is extended or anything like that for this next year, but it will be primarily focused on making clear, like, this is not a day that you should be scheduling, a final exam or the start of school or things like that.
Yeah.
Is that?
And depending on when we end up coming to a decision, it might be closer to the start of the school year. Stuff's already getting planned, so we might at that point need to have a grace period just because stuff has already started being planned. But I hope that we're not waiting until 12 months from today to do anything.
No, I think that there's a way to kind of feather in, at least put markers on the calendar for next year. And if there has to be, if the following year we would need to put those markers down and then add conditions. But yeah, I think we're solving in the moment.
And the sort of superstitious part of me, when you asked that question, Director Hollins, about changing the calendar, you know, we got an extra week of spring break in 2020 because the governor shut down schools. So the calendar can change due to forces beyond our control. So I just want to name that because I feel like not naming it opens us up for the possibility.
We've
That's
also
my superstitious
approved
side.
SEL days like just this year even. So
Right. Yeah, and there's the social emotional learning days. We also had a snow day, so that's built in. But there are factors that might impact the calendar beyond that wouldn't necessarily require a vote from the board, like the governor shutting down schools.
Good point. Planned Parenthood of Columbia Willamette has an amazing and very inclusive annual calendar that has, it's got every, Trans Day of Remembrance, it's got Ramadan, it's got, everything. So if you want that for reference, take a look at that. So we're gonna vote now on the resolution to approve the 2022-2023 school district calendar. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. All those opposed, please indicate by saying no. Are there any abstentions? Resolution 6487 is approved by a vote of 7-0, with Student Representative Weinberg voting
yes.
I just want to thank our students on the DSC and are also the students who spoke for their advocacy.
Thank you. Noted. Okay, I believe our final topic is a resolution to recognize Juneteenth as a paid holiday for non-representative employees. Deputy Superintendent Hertz, can you please introduce this item?
Be happy to do so, Chair DePass. As you know, last year on June 17th, President Biden signed a bill approving Juneteenth as a federal holiday. And on June 19th, Governor Brown signed a bill recognizing Juneteenth as a state holiday. So as per board policy, in order for the district to make this a paid holiday for non-represented employees, the board must approve by resolution.
Thank you. So do I have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 6477, resolution to recognize Juneteenth as a paid holiday for non-represented employees?
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
I think all the black people was ready to move that one.
I'm waiting for the no's. Is there any board discussion on the holiday that can't be answered in an email?
Yes, because I have
I'm being a little facetious.
maybe a technical question. The title of this is for non-represented employees, but it actually might include some represented employees who are working during that day. Is that correct? So I don't know if we need a title change.
No,
There's no non-represented employees who would get, there's no represented employees who would get this.
It's just a different mechanism. So our PFS, this began with an ask from the PFSP team. And in the successor contract, PFSP, we had to negotiate with PFSP to add this holiday for their workforce. So the mechanism for other than represented, I'm circling, sorry, it's late, I'm tired. Our non-represented process for adding holidays is board resolution. Otherwise, it is voted on by the board in a CBA, ratifying a CBA. PFSP, DCU, and SEIU all have it reflected either through memoranda of understanding or in their collective bargaining agreements, yes.
So this would be the last group whose work year is over the 19th.
Well, there might be situations where it might be in some of our PAT members' work years. And of course, we have an open contract with PAT, so we'll be addressing that.
Yeah. And maybe this can be addressed later, but it seems like if we have a holiday, whoever's working there, like that would be.
Yes.
I mean,
so this is the last group for this year, right? Where we need approval to move forward.
That's, I guess, what my question was. So every other group has it in their
CBA or through a memorandum of understanding with the bargaining unit, yes.
I know we don't often add holidays. I was looking back the last time I add holidays, but it does seem strange that it's, if we have a holiday for the district, that it would be like you have to bargain it.
Any
Bless
benefit, you have to, the requirements are that you bargain any benefit, even if it is.
Even if you're just gonna.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And the last holiday that was approved was Martin Luther King Day.
Yeah, I was gonna
So
say.
I just want to clarify because I'm hearing two different things.
Okay.
And that is on PAT, we're about to open their contract for bargaining. And right now, it's not in place for that group. Is that correct?
This year, it does not impact their members because the school year does not go over.
Okay, and there's
June.
And there's no.
This year it'd be June 20th.
There's no PAT members that would work on that day.
So
With
this
a
is not the
longer-
mechanism. So a
Okay.
board resolution is not the mechanism for addressing
agree,
the, yes.
But I think I just heard Director Brim Edwards say this was the
And that
last
is
group.
bargaining. That's
Okay.
negotiations.
So you're saying there may be people, if we're not done bargaining, who wouldn't have this as a, so
No, no.
sorry. I know we don't do this very often, so I'm just trying to understand how it works.
We are not going to have a situation where we don't offer the holiday to people who are working in this year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Appreciate that. Ms. Bradshaw, is there any public comment about this?
No.
Okay. So the board will now vote. I'm sorry, have we already voted on resolution 6487? Okay, so the board will now vote on resolution 6487. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong number.
6477.
It's 6477. Thank you. We'll vote on 6477, resolution to recognize Juneteenth as a paid holiday for non-represented employees. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes. All opposed, please indicate by saying no. And are there any abstentions? And I vote yes too. I think I failed to say that. So resolution 6477 is approved by a vote of 7-0 with Student Representative Weinberg voting.
Yes.
Okay. I believe that concludes our business for the evening.
We
No,
pulled
we
stuff
got
from
two.
the consent.
Oh,
agenda.
I'm so sorry. Yes, we do have it's 64, thank you. It's 6484, and then the expenditure contract for education resource strategies. I'm not eager to leave.
Well, I'm
So, Director Scott, you wanted to pull.
yeah, I'm eager to leave, so I'll be quick. No, I wanted to pull this resolution, and I think, do we have Ms. Brennan available virtually? And I wanted to just ask a couple questions on the record, and so I will admit this is my third year, I think, approving this resolution. I am going to vote in favor of this, but I do think it was worth just having a very quick board discussion about. I did, as we heard testimony earlier, I did meet with a group of parents who are a little bit frustrated, by the policy, and from their perspective, again, you heard in their testimony, the question is, because PPS allows up to 100 students to transfer in, and there are other reasons why students transfer in and out that are allowed under state law, but we have discretion to make this decision. We do allow up to 100 students to transfer in. They're essentially asking, why don't we simultaneously allow up to 100 students to transfer out? And I think there are lots of different reasons why families, students and families might choose to want to leave the district. And I think there are, and in talking to Ms. Brennan earlier today, there are some really good sort of policy rationales for this. And again, I know it's late, so we don't need to talk long about it. But I think just if you wouldn't mind giving a really brief overview of why we do sort of allow those students in, and how that serves the programmatic needs of PPS, I think that would be beneficial.
Thank you, Director Scott. And just want to make sure, is my audio working?
It is, yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Can you hear us?
Hello?
We can hear you. Are you able to hear us? I'm going to take that as a no.
Sorry, I'm not sure if I'm
We can hear you.
Okay. I've lost, okay, there we are. I think, I now have, sorry for that technical glitch.
Can you hear
And
us? Can you hear us?
I can hear you now. Yeah, thank you. Sorry for that problem. So this is the time of year when districts, each district approves their plan for transfers between school districts. So this is an annual duty of the board and the staff recommendation. To develop the plan every year, we look both at what the general strategy is for transfers across PPS schools, and then try and apply those same theories to drive our decisions for students who are coming in from other districts or who are requesting to leave PBS to go to other districts. We also have to follow a pretty stringent set of state laws around this. So specifically regarding general transfers of students in or out of PBS, what we have identified, and you'll see in your packet, is that the demographics of students who come into PPS from other districts do not fully mirror the general district, in that it's higher percentages of students of color, higher percentages of students who speak Spanish at home. What we know anecdotally is that these are more likely to be students who've been impacted by gentrification, and the ability to remain in PBS to finish at their current school provides a vital stability for these students. We also know that because of the nature of the state laws, the only mechanism that we have for allowing students who live in other districts to access our language immersion programs, which are not available everywhere, and allow students to access instruction in their home language, like our Russian immersion program and our Vietnamese immersion program, the standard interdistrict transfer in is the only mechanism for doing so. And then finally, it is our only mechanism in place at this time to allow students who have been displaced from Portland to return to Albina schools for Black students whose families are no longer residents in our district, but who live in other districts, to attend some of the only majority Black schools in the entire state. So these are priority programs and initiatives of our district, and the standard inter-district transfer, that general transfer in, is the primary mechanism for achieving that. We don't know of any similar programmatic or equity-based initiatives that are parallel for students going from PBS to other districts. If there were so, and we're open to exploring reasons to release students that have to do or that have a similar equity focus as the reasons that we give for student that I just articulated for students coming in. Further, because we allow a lot of transfer in PPS, we allow students to move through our lottery. We have many district options, but when it comes time to transfer between neighborhood schools, we look for a reason. We want it to be a substantiated hardship need and not just general interest. And so that's another reason why we don't promote transfers out of PPS unless there's a reason that falls within the state's hardship definition.
Great. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And just to sort of summarize, because again, I think it's exactly what we want to be doing as a district is looking at what is our vision, what is our goal, and I think what I'm hearing from staff is there are very good programmatic reasons that benefit the students that transfer in and the district overall for allowing those. There are fewer reasons why we would allow students to transfer out. I do want to express, I understand the frustration of the families, and from a funding standpoint, if they choose to leave the district and have to pay tuition, once they've done that, PPS doesn't retain that state funding, and nor does the new district get it. In fact, it stays with the state school fund and then gets redistributed statewide. So I can understand from their perspective, they're sort of saying, if you just release my student, I won't have to pay tuition, that money stays in the local area. As a PPS school board member, what I explain to them is I have to think about the impact of these policies. While I completely understand where they're coming from and see that frustration, I don't want to pass any policies or make any changes that would encourage more students, or as you said, make it easier for students to transfer out of the district than we even allow in terms of inter-district transfers. So again, I can understand the frustration of the families, but I think staff have thought through this very well, and I'm going to support the resolution moving forward. Thank you.
I also wanted to just appreciate you for articulating those strong, compelling reasons for allowing the Russian, Vietnamese, Spanish, and Black students to transfer in due to gentrification, access to language programs, and things that we know that will help our students of color succeed. So I really appreciate that, and I also appreciate your articulation of the reasons we wouldn't allow. We would want to apply similar equity considerations for transfers out, and want to see that there's a substantiated hardship. So I just want to appreciate you and let you know I'm also going to be in favor of the staff recommendation.
Madam Chair, I had just a question about just the change. And again, I think I'm going to support this, but also want to just make visible if we between 2016 to 2018 we had a different policy. Did we change because there was a change in law, or just a change in practice at PPS?
Yes, I can address that. So the state changed laws in 2014 and 2015. There were administrative regulations that came down from ODE that was late in 2016, so didn't affect our 2016 practice, our 2016 plan. But what we learned later was that we weren't actually fully in compliance with our 2016 plan. For example, we allowed students who were already enrolled in a school to be considered eligible for priority transfer as it's defined under state law, when in fact ODE clarified for us in 2017 that you can only be eligible for that priority if you were attending that other district before and you moved into our district. So what had happened is there were families who had enrolled in a district as tuition paying families and then applied, and for that one brief year received priority because they were already enrolled. We didn't fully understand that it's only limited to students who were enrolled and moved into our district, not just were attending as our residents, but on tuition. Yes. So we corrected the plan in the future years. And we understand that there were families who were looking forward to that rule being continuing. But indeed, our guidance was that it was not compliant with the language that's in state law. And then it also doesn't match the broader district goals that we just described.
Great, thank you. I think it's always of value to share when we've had to make changes, or we've made changes based on just the evolving regulatory or state law. Thank you.
Is there any additional comment? Before we vote on the resolution 6484, that's the resolution to approve the staff recommendation for interdistrict transfers. All in favor, please. I'm sorry, we need a motion.
So moved.
Whoa. I just wanted to be
Sweet.
second because, see, Andrew had already, so I just want to make sure that we were clear on that.
That was slick. So we have a motion by Director Scott and a second by Director Green to approve the staff recommendation for interdistrict transfers. All those in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
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 Yes. All opposed, please indicate by saying no. Are there any abstentions? Resolution 6484 is approved by a vote of 7-0 with Student Representative Weinberg unofficially voting.
Yes.
Great. And we have one final item, and that is the expenditure contract
Yeah,
for education and resource strategies.
There's a $743,000 contract for developing a strategic resource analysis and plan. Is that separate from the budget, or I'm just curious if it's new or what is it?
Where does it live?
Yeah, so it's part of our current budget, and it's in-depth analysis regarding how we use our resources, so people, time, and money across our school system, as we start doing a deep dive into assessing how our opportunities, whether it's how we distribute funds to school. So some of the conversations that we've had is around like, how do we allocate resources to school to support our specific strategies? So that's an example of some of the information we can obtain from ERS. ERS, probably should have taken a step back. ERS is a national nonprofit organization that's worked across various school districts across the country. Large urban districts, whether it's Chicago, Philadelphia, Boston, LA Unified, and they do in-depth analysis to really give us insights into where are our resources going in respect to our new strategic plan. How does that benchmark against other districts that are following similar strategies or exploring some of the opportunities to reassess how funding is managed, whether it's at a school site, whether it's taking a look at a staffing formula, and how is that staffing formula supporting core requirements? How are then the core requirements being invested in to support the instructional framework? So it's pieces, all of these pieces come into play to support the broader instructional framework when we look across all of our resources, and try to get into this like clean look as how are we spending now in relation to our strategic plan? How does that then compare to other districts or pursuing similar investments? But then the uniqueness of our circumstances as we look to roll out our instructional framework, how are we going to find the resources to continue to support that, scale it over the next few years? Yeah.
You said it's currently in place, but it looks like it's a new contract, unless I'm reading it incorrectly.
When I said currently in place, I meant it is a new contract. It's in place for this year.
And so this is, so we already have it, but this is, or no?
No, sorry. Yeah, so we do not. It's new.
Okay, just, thank you. And then second, like, how would the public see what, or is this totally to inform like staff thinking? I mean, it's just a large amount, so I'm curious.
Yeah.
Like, seems like,
So-
as you describe it, it would be
Yeah, there would be.
informative.
Yeah, there would be artifacts generated from this, inclusive reports that we can. That would not just help inform us, but also help inform how we engage with our. A term I'm coining, thinking about is like our annual planning process and engagement in the different work streams, whether it's community engagement, how we work with our school leaders, how we work across departments. So this would then feed into that, and by default, we would naturally be able to see the results to particularly school sites and our departments. And so I'd be excited as we get through this process to also be able to share a report of like, what are some of the opportunities we can consider? Because this isn't just for next year. This is to really set the foundation for long-term sustainability when we think about what are all the amazing things we want to do, and then just how are we ensuring that we're investing in all the right things.
Thank you.
I had a really quick question. My question was, so with understanding about where the money is going, does that also tie back to the effectiveness, so kind of like performance outcomes, like how effective is what we're spending money on? Does this analysis allow us to see that?
That would be part of it, yeah.
Okay.
So for example, how are we investing our resources in specific subgroups of our population? And then how does that tie into what we want to see? It won't get into analyzing or making determinations of the outcomes, but it'll help raise awareness regarding how our resources being spent as effective as possible.
So like, what are the outcomes of the spending, but not whether.
Yeah, so it's like, what are the outcomes of the spending? Now it's up to us, the board, the team, to determine whether those are the outcomes we desire.
Thank you.
So ultimately, it's very helpful to us.
Yes.
Thank you, Chief Delgadillo. I appreciate your comments tonight. And Director Brim Edwards, and Director Comstan, we spent years working with the Secretary of State, and this would also help us with one of their recommendations on the national benchmarking that we
I was going to
So,
say something
yes.
about that, but thank you for pointing that out. Appreciate that.
In terms of process then, are we then just voting on Resolution 6480? Okay, so
I'll make a motion to approve the contract.
I'll second Andrew's motion.
this is a pattern.
And I have a question.
Yes, please.
Oh, here we go.
I'm just trying to understand. So I try to keep stuff like basic. So is this kind of like an internal audit of what we're spending our money on, or
it's
tied to the strategic plan?
Strategic resource audit.
So how much of this could be done internally versus contracted out?
Not much. Partly because we don't have the capacity to do that. We don't have enough people to then take on this work above the baseline work that we do. But the additional critical component to that is the benchmarking against other districts. We don't have access to all the data. So all of these other districts, whether it's Dallas ISD, Palm Beach, they've participated and have gone through similar processes like this. And so ERS has like all of their data, and so we can benchmark. And so when we have questions, when we look across our spending at the central office, or when we look across spending at school sites, like how does that stack up against other comparable districts that are trying to do the same work we're doing?
Could we hire, I'm looking at the number, the amount, could we hire a couple folks, or I'm looking at this budget, a few folks to do this work and still save money from?
We could always hire, but we would not get the same caliber or be able to find the same skill set to perform this. But then it would be the skill set with access to all the back-end data that we don't have access to.
So these are nationally renowned experts in this field?
I get that.
Yeah.
I get that part. I guess I'm looking at the number of, the dollar amount of number, and we just seen our nutrition services and our janitors and stuff, and we're spending $743,000 or $850,000 for a report. That it just doesn't sit necessarily well to where to look at our effectiveness, when I'm thinking that the quality of people that we're hiring and it's touted that the folks that we're hiring could potentially do some of this work. And you're saying we don't have the expertise, but they have the expertise to hire and do this work. And I'm sure it's going to be at a less amount that we're paying out for this. So that just kind of doesn't sit well with me, where we're sending out this money for a report, unless that is going to directly affect, one, our kids and our kids' outcomes, which I didn't hear that it really affects how our kids are performing in the classroom, who we're here for. Two, how does that help, like with our budget gaps, when we're spending almost over?
It would help inform us where we need to be shifting, where are some of the considerations we need to be shifting our resources to support the student outcomes we want to see.
But don't we know that already? Because that's part of the strategic plan and some of the initiatives that superintendent has been talking about as far as shifting resources to schools or places where it needs to be done at. So I guess it just seems like it's redundant that we're going to have someone tell us the same stuff that we already know.
It's more than a report. It's a process. They lead a process in the district. They'll engage many of us, including the board, including senior leadership. I don't have all the steps in front of me this evening, but it is a process that goes over more than one fiscal year, and it will help guide us to really look at how our resources are being spent now and what we what we need to adjust in order to be able to realize right now if we wanted to do our complete strategic plan, we don't have the resources to do that. So how do we have the conversation with our internal staff, our community, our board, about what are the right places to go to get to where we want to be? So
I guess I would need more information. I think I would need more information on what that process looked like to warrant the amount of money we're spending, because what you're telling me seems like it was told to us before, as far as like what are audits. We have our audits and some of the things that we're talking about as far as, where we're supposed to put our funds at and how we support our kids. I seem like I've heard that argument before, and now I seem like hearing that same argument again, just from a nationally renowned organization to do that same stuff that I've already heard, seems like I've already heard. So I guess for me, I just would really want to know what we're actually getting that's going to benefit, our kids first, and then the district second, before I can support something like this, just so I know what that is. Because just saying, we're going to give $850,000, to me, it just seems like another audit. Whether it's a more detailed audit or what have you, it just seems like it's another audit.
Can I ask a question? It sounds like some board members have some questions. Is there urgency to the approval of this contract at this board meeting versus holding it over?
There is, and just from the perspective of being able to start collecting the data, that takes 3 to 4 months to start going through and combing the data, because ultimately we will get to an action plan that will then help. They would also, ERS would also support us through this process with, as Deputy Superintendent Hertz was sharing, that would involve additional supports, helping to design additional tools, and in preparation as we get into next fiscal year. So the idea is to ramp up over the summer with collecting data. And so the sooner we can start, the better, but obviously, want to be responsive as well.
So,
We hope to have this in work far enough along so that as we are budgeting for 23-24, we have the data and the process has been brought along far enough to be to inform the following year's budget. So, and it is a multi-year shift over time.
it sounds to me like a big part of what this is about, and tell me if I'm wrong, is about really decoding a lot of the inputs that we have and connecting them to the outcomes that we're looking for, because right now we don't have a good way to map where our resources are being allocated relative to the academic outcomes that we're looking for in our kids, and to be able to track those metrics, which is something we as a board are interested in. And to me, it sounds like that's a big part of what this exercise is.
That's one of the big components, and then the subsequent component to that would be then what are then our considerations to then implement or changes we'd like to see when we look at our resources.
I think I understand the frustration about, it's a big dollar contract, and saying, is it going to create an impact? But I think in our state audit, one of the findings was that there were all these initiatives. It was like an initiative overload, and we weren't really measuring. We are trying this and trying that not in a very coordinated way. And so to me, what I understand is this contract allows us to align the inputs and the activities that we're doing with the outcomes that we want to see. And it's a long process. I don't know who has the time for this either. Like, it's a long-term change. It's a long-term change management, which we're not going to see the on-the-ground benefit for some time. But it's important to understand which of these initiatives that we put forth and that we implement are actually creating the change we want to see. And if we don't have that investigation, then we're still just throwing out, one thing after the next and moving people around, and it's creating the same outcomes, which are not positive outcomes for the kids.
So I guess my question then would be, what have we been doing? Are we just
Well,
been, have we
have
just
like
been spending money without
reading
any kind of?
programs and math programs and.
No,
you know.
I understand what you're saying, but going by what you're saying, at least what I hear is that you're saying we've been spending money and we haven't really paid attention to how we were spending it, what we were spending it on, and now this is going to kind of tell us what that is and where we need to shift.
Well,
Maybe if I'm wrong, but
We really just adopted our strategic plan,
Yeah.
and at the beginning of the pandemic. So this
Yeah.
is,
Yeah, and June 2021 was when the strategic plan was adopted. And so we now think about what the strategic plan lays out, the 4 themes, the strategic outcomes. How does that, what's a through line with our board goals? It's like what is the allocation of our resources right now? What's the gap to get to that? And then like the second phase, right, because that's the data, that's the discovery, that's the analysis, and the second part are like, what are then the pieces that we need to be putting in place or having conversations about to put us in a place to shift those resources, not just for next year, but then like, how does this lay over the long term of the district's health when it just comes to both our finances, but then our duty to our students and the outcomes.
so and I wasn't here for when the strategic plan was brought forth. So when the strategic plan was brought forth, did it have a financial impact that went along with that? So we can see, well, hey, I'm proposing this. This is what I'm expecting it's going to cost. So I guess when I see a strategic plan, normally it comes with some kind of financial impact, and it has the data and stuff that you're talking about attached to it, and then usually after it goes for so long, you come back and assess how that worked.
I'll defer to. I have not seen one because that was also before my time. So just kind of seeing the creation of that to where we are now. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that when we arrived to our strategic plan, there wasn't then like the and so like a price tag associated with it. But we know that we have our existing resources. We have our strategic plan that was built up with a lot of community input, and this is what, as a board, we put our stake on the ground. This is what we want to accomplish. So now then is assessing, okay, what are the resources we have available? How are we investing those right now? We have a general idea, but then benchmarking, because like we may be thinking about it in a certain way, that then it's like, well, that you should be considering some other opportunities or a different way, and then how do we then execute on that?
I think it's also not only the Secretary of State's audit, but also like consistent reports from the CBRC saying like, we have all these initiatives. Is what we're spending money on for these initiatives, for the goals that we have laid out, is it effective? That these are the strategies we should be using. So that's kind of what I see coming out of this.
That's one component, is thinking about like the academic return on investment, and that, right, you need some data to then assess. And so that would be, okay, what outcomes have we received based on what we've been doing? But then also, we know that our strategic plan, our forward together, this is where we want to go. So what is the gap from what we're doing now to where we want to go? And what are then some of the key decisions we need to be thinking about to repurpose, reallocate, advocate for additional funding, whatever the case may be, to then put us in that direction.
And I'm wondering if some of this might be also like thinking about how do we deploy. So what I'm hearing when you say we're going to look at our resources and think about how we deploy them to get to the outcomes we've said we want, is looking at our structuring. Everybody who's come before us about the budget has said, get rid of administrators. But, we really need our administrators to do things like plan the budget and catch the fraud and resource the teachers and plan the PD and advocate for our SPED students. But I think this is also an opportunity to say, how are we deploying our resources efficiently to do all the things the school district needs to do? And can we make cuts in administration? Can we shore up a certain segment that we've maybe been underfunding, and that's trickled down to the classroom, and that students aren't getting supports in these different ways? Yeah. And so that's what I'm hearing when I hear this, is it's going to be sort of this global view on how are we arranged, how are we using our resources, and is it actually the best from an objective viewpoint rather than it feels like it's working? That's kind of what my sense of what this is.
It's that, and to put it in a very just example, we have our equity formula, And so, like, how does our equity formula stack up across the school district? What would it look like if we wanted to increase that or change it? Like, what are then those, I don't like to use this word, trade-offs to assess or to advocate, because we feel that, hey, we want our funding formula to be more equitably driven. What would that design look like? What would be some of the considerations to take into account? Because we know that if we then fund schools accordingly, more equitably, then we can push the outcome. We can push towards the outcomes we want to see. So these are some of the considerations that we'd be exploring over the course of the next few months, so that when we get to next year's budget, so I know we're just starting, or we're just talking about, next week we'll be talking about next year's budget, but it's like, what is the through line, the long-term sustainability through line?
Okay, I'll have to say last two things and I'm done. So one thing is, because, like I said, I asked the question, I haven't got an answer as far as when the strategic plan was put forward, was there a financial impact with that to go along with the strategic plan?
No, we did not have
So there was-
dollar
so-
amounts on the strategic plan.
Okay, so we didn't have a baseline, so now we're going back to basically try to get a baseline for what the strategic plan and how we can accomplish that. That's what this is for.
We had actually hoped to bring these folks in last fall, but if the two variants kind of, our focus changed again back to the pandemic, and we had hoped to start much sooner than this. So we really hope to inform this year's budget, but because of the two variants that came through, and we really had to focus on just staff and student safety and keeping people educated, right, and keeping education services going.
Okay. And then the second thing,
right.
then the second thing and the last thing is, I guess for me, I would just really like to see what this entails. Data-wise, what they're collecting, how it's going to be disaggregated, how it's going to be, that's what I would want to see as well.
We can share much more, and I think one of the most valuable things is their interactions with large urban school districts, public school districts across the country. And
or even share,
that's
you can even share the RFP that they submitted.
Sure.
And I'm sure they submitted a whole complex.
Happy to share that with the
That would
board.
be great.
Yep.
Yeah, I think the fact that we're comparing with sister districts is going to be really valuable, because we'll be able, of those urban districts, we'll be able to know which ones are successful or more successful at student outcomes, and starting from scratch with that to pay someone to collect data from those different districts, I think is going to cost more than just having somebody that's done it already. They have the dashboard already, so.
So speaking of that, I just want to make clear what we're voting on. So the 750 is for this April 20th to March 31st of next year, and there's an option to renew. And it says the total through renewals is 850, but we're paying a huge amount up front, and then the add-on is the 2-year renewals is just another 100,000? Or am I reading this? That's what it looks like on the.
Yeah, so to clarify that, it would be, if there were, the add-on would be just $100,000, whether it's for, if it happens to be 2 years, or if it happens to be 2 months, if any sort of additional work that may stem out of this, if there's like
on-call services. So the base year is 750, that gives us the base of the dashboard or whatever the thing is, and then it's just 100,000 total. It's not going to be another 750 the following
If
year.
it turned out, we would be here having a conversation. If there was additional layers phases of work that stemmed out of this, that there was interest in additional conversations that we want to have, we would bring that to the board.
But the renewals don't come back to us.
No, I don't think so. No, not and it would be capped at $100,000.
So if it was anything more than 850, we'd get back, but staff would do just the renewal.
And the 700 some thousand, that's for 1 year?
Correct.
Well, we have a motion on the table to adopt Resolution 6480, expenditure contracts, including. Yes.
You already approved that resolution with
Just, thank you. So the motion on the table is to approve just this contract with Education Resource Strategies. Director Scott moved and Director Green seconded, but we're ready for a vote now. Thank you. We'll now vote on, it's not the resolution, it's contract number 91415, Education Resource Strategies. All those in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
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 Yes. All those opposed, please indicate by saying no.
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 Are there any abstentions? The motion passes by a vote of 4 to 3 in favor. And Student Representative Weinberg?
Yes.
Thank you all. I believe that that is our final business for this evening. Thank you, staff, for staying so late.